She paid just $600 for an old 1965 Ford Mustang, rusted, silent, and forgotten in a barn. Morgan Reed thought she was buying a junkyard project to save her failing garage. But when the original owner's father showed up 2 weeks later, he didn't come to take it back. He came with a worn leather folder containing military documents, photographs, and a story about his son's suspicious death in Afghanistan. What started as a simple restoration would soon put Morgan in the crosshairs of powerful men willing to kill to protect their secrets. The cherry-red Mustang roared through the night, its engine screaming as Morgan pushed it beyond any reasonable speed limit. The beam of headlights cut through darkness behind her, gaining ground with every second. The sleek black SUV had appeared from nowhere 5 minutes ago, forcing her off the main highway onto this winding country road. Morgan gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white, eyes darting between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. The restoration wasn't even complete. The passenger door still mismatched in primer gray, the rebuilt transmission grinding in third gear. A sharp crack pierced the night as a bullet shattered her rear window. Morgan ducked instinctively, the Mustang swerving dangerously close to the guardrail. Her right hand reached for the manila envelope on the passenger seat, making sure the documents were still there. Everything Ryan Westbrook had died trying to expose. Everything his father James had spent years trying to uncover. Everything that had nearly cost Morgan her life. 3 months earlier, the morning sun cast long shadows through the cracked windows of Reed's Auto Repair. The lights flickered as Morgan flipped the switch, half of them long burned out. The small garage had been her father's pride for 30 years before his heart gave out last winter. Now it was hers, along with all its problems. Morgan dropped her toolbox near the hydraulic lift and pressed the button on the ancient coffee maker. The rich aroma of dark roast, her one daily luxury, filled the quiet space. She inhaled deeply, savoring the moment of calm before another day of scraping by. A decade ago, she'd imagined a different life. Maybe college, perhaps following her older sister Amanda into the military. But Dad's health had declined, Amanda was deployed to Afghanistan, and someone had to keep the garage running. Now Amanda was gone too, killed in action 3 years ago, leaving Morgan with nothing but memories and her sister's folded flag displayed on the office wall. The quiet morning was interrupted by the metallic clang of the mail slot. Morgan sighed as she gathered the envelopes from the floor. Bills, advertisements, and one official-looking letter from First National Bank. She didn't need to open it to know what it said. The third notice about the overdue mortgage on the garage. $30,000 overdue, with 90 days before foreclosure proceedings would begin. The bell above the door jingled, and Noah Chen stepped inside, a lanky 19-year-old with perpetually oil-stained hands and eager eyes. His father had been a Marine who came back from Iraq with one leg and too many nightmares. Noah had been hanging around the garage since he was 12, and Morgan had finally put him on part-time payroll last year, though payroll was often whatever cash she could spare at the end of the week. "Morning, boss," Noah said, already reaching for his work shirt. "Mr. Gunderson's Camry ready for pickup?" "Just needs an oil change," Morgan replied, quickly folding the bank notice into her pocket. "Alignments done, brake pads replaced. Should be good to go by noon." Noah nodded, then pointed to the small laptop open on the workbench. "What's that?" "Just browsing," Morgan said. But there was a hint of something in her voice that made Noah lean closer to see the screen. It showed a local classified ad. 1965 Ford Mustang Fastback. Needs total restoration. $600 firm. Sold as is, where is. $600 for a 65 Mustang? Noah's eyes widened. That's got to be a scam, or it's just a rusted frame. Morgan zoomed in on the single blurry photo. The car was partially covered by a tarp, sitting in what looked like an old barn. Even in this condition, it would be worth thousands if the frame was solid. "Thinking about it?" Noah asked carefully. Morgan closed the laptop. "Just looking. We've got enough project cars taking up space." But her eyes lingered on the screen a moment too long. That evening, after Noah had gone home and the last customer had picked up their minivan, Morgan found herself dialing the number from the ad. The directions led her 30 miles outside town, down dirt roads to a property that had seen better days. A weathered man in overalls introduced himself simply as Peterson, claiming he was handling the estate sale for taxes owed. Previous owners long gone. Bank just wants it off the books, he explained, leading her to a dilapidated barn. The padlock opened with a protesting screech, and the heavy wooden door swung outward to reveal the silhouette beneath decades of dust and cobwebs. Even in the fading light, Morgan could see the distinctive fastback profile of the Mustang. The once vibrant paint had faded to a ghostly red, with rust claiming the rocker panels and wheel wells. The tires were flat, windows clouded with grime, and interior visible through the driver's window showed cracked leather and a sagging headliner. But Morgan wasn't seeing the decay. She was seeing her father teaching her how to change spark plugs on their neighbor's classic Ford when she was 9. She was seeing Amanda's face lighting up when they restored that old motorcycle together the summer before she enlisted. She was seeing potential where others would see only ruin. Engine locked up? Morgan asked, running her hand along the hood. Probably. Been sitting here at least 20 years from what I gather. Morgan circled the vehicle slowly, checking the frame rails for serious structural damage. Despite the surface rust, the bones seemed solid. $600 was nearly all she had left in her personal account. But something about this car called to her. Perhaps it was the challenge, or maybe the distraction from the looming foreclosure. "I'll take it," she said, surprising even herself. "I can arrange a tow truck tomorrow." Peterson seemed equally surprised but happily accepted the cash. As he counted the bills, Morgan noticed something odd. A brief hesitation, a glance toward the house up the hill, almost as if he were following a script. But the title transfer was legitimate, and by the next afternoon the Mustang was being lowered onto the concrete floor of Reed's Auto Repair. Noah whistled as the tow truck pulled away. "You actually did it. You're either crazy or brilliant." "Probably both," Morgan admitted, already pulling on her work gloves. "Let's see what we've got here." The next week passed in a blur of discovery and dismantling. Each evening after regular customers were gone, Morgan and Noah would work on the Mustang. The seats came out first, revealing floorboards that had miraculously avoided serious rust damage. The carpet was another story, moldy, rotted, and home to generations of mice. In the glove compartment, they found the original owner's manual and a faded photograph of a young man standing proudly beside the car when it was new. "Wonder who he was," Noah said, carefully placing the photo on the workbench. Morgan shrugged. "Whoever owned it loved it once. That's obvious from the maintenance records. Something must have happened for it to end up abandoned like that." By the 5th day, they had the hood open. The straight 6 engine was seized solid as expected. Oil turned to sludge, hoses cracked and brittle, and the carburetor had become a permanent home for a bird's nest. Morgan was elbow deep in the engine compartment when the bell above the door chimed. "We're closed," she called without looking up. "I'm not here for a repair," a deep voice replied. Morgan turned to see an older man standing just inside the doorway, tall with military straight posture despite his age, silver hair neatly trimmed and eyes that carried the weight of profound loss. He wore a simple button-down shirt tucked into jeans, a leather jacket despite the warm spring day, and work boots that had seen years of use. "Can I help you with something?" Morgan asked, wiping her hands on a shop rag. The man's eyes moved past her to the partially dismantled Mustang, and something in his expression shifted. A softening, a recognition, perhaps even a touch of relief. "My name is James Westbrook," he said finally, "and I believe you bought my son's car." Morgan tensed, immediately defensive. "I have the title. It was a legitimate sale." James held up his hands. "I'm not here to contest that. The car is yours, fair and square." He took a few steps closer, his eyes never leaving the Mustang. "I just wanted to know who had it now." Noah had quietly moved closer to Morgan, sensing her unease. "Your son," Morgan said carefully. "He's the original owner?" James nodded, reaching into his jacket to remove a worn leather folder. "His name was Ryan. He bought this Mustang when he was 17, saved for it from summer jobs. We restored it together, spent 2 years getting it perfect." His voice caught slightly. "He was going to take it to a show in Dallas when he got back from his tour." "Tour?" Morgan's gaze flickered to the folded flag on her office wall. "Military? Army, Special Operations, Afghanistan, 2008. James's jaw tightened. He didn't come back. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken understanding. Morgan's expression softened as she recognized the specific grief they shared, the loss of someone to a distant war. "I'm sorry," she said simply. James nodded once, acknowledging her words. "After he died, I just covered it up and left it. Couldn't sell it, couldn't look at it. For 15 years it sat in that barn. Then the property taxes caught up with me, and the county." He trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed. "I arranged the sale through Peterson. Needed to know it went to the right person." Morgan frowned. "You set this up? The classified ad?" "I wanted to see who would respond. What kind of person would want a car in that condition?" Ooh, James looked directly at her now. "Most who came were parts hunters, looking to strip it and sell the pieces. You were the only one who saw it as something worth saving." He held out the leather folder. "These belong to Ryan. Build sheets, restoration notes, photos of the process. I thought maybe you could use them." Morgan hesitated before accepting the folder, feeling the weight of something more significant than just paper and photographs. "I don't understand. Why give these to me?" James's gaze returned to the Mustang. "Because that car was never just transportation to Ryan. It was a legacy, something he poured his heart into. I think he'd want it in the hands of someone who understands that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key, old, worn smooth by years of use, with a small metal tag attached by a leather cord. "You'll need this too. It's the original ignition key." As Morgan took the key, their eyes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about honoring someone's memory, about completing something left unfinished. "I'll do right by it," Morgan said quietly. "I promise." James nodded, seemingly satisfied, then turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "Ryan always said you could tell everything about a mechanic by how they treat the cars others have given up on." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I think he would have liked you, Ms. Reed." After James left, Morgan and Noah stood in silence, the weight of the encounter settling around them like dust after a storm. "So," Noah finally said, "I guess this isn't just another project car anymore." Morgan looked down at the key in her palm, then at the folder in her other hand. "I guess not." That night, long after Noah had gone home, Morgan sat at her desk with the leather folder open before her. Inside were meticulously organized documents: the original bill of sale from 1965, handwritten restoration notes in neat penmanship, parts receipts, and photographs chronicling the transformation from rust bucket to showpiece. The photos told a story more eloquent than words. A teenage boy with his father, both in grease-stained clothes, smiling beside the dismantled Mustang. The same pair installing a rebuilt engine. Ryan, now a young man, standing proudly next to the completed restoration, the Mustang gleaming cherry red in the sunlight. In every image, there was unmistakable pride, a bond between father and son forged through shared purpose. The last photo was different. Ryan in army fatigues, standing beside the Mustang before deployment, his expression more serious but no less determined. Morgan studied his face, seeing echoes of both James and the car itself. Something classic, something built to endure. Tucked into the back of the folder was an envelope marked simply, "For the next owner." Morgan's hands trembled slightly as she opened it, unfolding a handwritten letter on lined paper. "To whoever finds themselves the caretaker of this Mustang," it began. "If you're reading this, then either I've decided to sell my car, unlikely, or something has happened to me, and fate has brought you into this story. Either way, welcome. This car might look like just metal and rubber to some, but to me, it's been a journey. My father and I restored it together during a time when we barely knew how to talk to each other. We didn't need words when we had wrenches. Every bolt, every panel, every hour spent covered in grease taught me something about patience, craftsmanship, and the value of doing things right. I don't know who you are or how you came to own this car, but I have one request. Don't just make it like it was. Make it yours." The best restorations aren't about returning something to factory specs. They're about honoring the past while creating something new. This Mustang has carried my dreams. Now it can carry yours. There's something else you should know. If you found something unusual hidden in this car, it's there for a reason. What you do with it is your choice. I just ask that you consider carefully what's right. Wherever I am now, I wish you good roads and a smooth ride. Ryan Westbrook. Morgan read the letter twice more, each time feeling like Ryan was somehow in the room with her. She carefully folded it and placed it back in the envelope, then turned to look at the Mustang through the office window. In the dim light, she could almost see past the decay to the car it had once been, and perhaps could be again. The next morning, Morgan arrived at the garage before sunrise, driven by a newfound purpose. She began a systematic inspection of the Mustang, looking at it with fresh eyes. It wasn't just a restoration project now. It was a responsibility, a promise made to both the living and the dead. Noah arrived to find her already deep into disassembling the dashboard. "You're here early," he observed, handing her a coffee from the shop down the street. "Couldn't sleep," Morgan admitted. "Something about this car. I can't explain it." "You read the folder?" Noah asked, picking up a wrench to help. Morgan nodded. Ryan and his father restored this completely once before. Everything's documented. Parts, processes, even paint formulas. She hesitated. There was a letter, too, from Ryan. Noah's eyebrows rose. Like from beyond the grave? Written before deployment, I think. Left for whoever ended up with the car. Morgan focused on loosening a particularly stubborn bolt. There was something else in the letter, a hint that he might have hidden something in the car. Something important. Noah's eyes widened. Like what? Money? Treasure? Morgan shook her head. "I don't know, but I intend to find out." They worked methodically, documenting every part they removed, checking unusual spaces, testing for hidden compartments. By mid-afternoon, they had the passenger seat completely removed, exposing the bare metal floor pan beneath. "Wait," Morgan said suddenly, running her hand along the carpeted area under where the seat had been. "This doesn't feel right." The carpet padding was thicker in one section, with a slight rectangular outline barely perceptible beneath. Using a utility knife, she carefully cut around the edges, peeling back the padding to reveal a small metal compartment welded to the floor, a modification not found in any factory Mustang. "That's military-grade work," Noah whispered, leaning closer. "My dad used to talk about how they'd modify vehicles in the field, hidden compartments for sensitive equipment or documents." Morgan's heart raced as she examined the compartment. It had a simple but effective latch mechanism designed to be overlooked by casual inspection. With a small flathead screwdriver, she released the latch and lifted the metal cover. Inside was a waterproof military document tube, the kind designed to protect contents in the harshest conditions. Next to it lay a set of dog tags that didn't bear Ryan's name and a small flash drive sealed in a protective case. "Holy shit," Noah breathed. "What is all this?" Morgan carefully removed the items, placing them on a clean shop rag. The dog tags belonged to someone named Michaels, David A., not Ryan Westbrook. The document tube was sealed with a threaded cap, designed to keep contents dry, even underwater. "Should we open it?" Noah asked, his voice hushed, as if they might be overheard. Morgan hesitated, thinking of James Westbrook's grief-lined face, of Ryan's letter, of her own sister who never came home from the same war. "Yes," she finally said, "I think that's why it's here. To be found." She carefully unsealed the document tube and slid the contents onto the workbench. Inside were rolled papers protected by a plastic sleeve, military reports, photographs, and a handwritten note with a date from May 2008, just days before Ryan's reported death. As Morgan unfolded the papers, her breath caught. The documents detailed something called Operation Sandstorm, a classified weapons transfer in Afghanistan. The photos showed military-grade weapons being loaded into unmarked trucks by men in civilian clothes. One photo clearly showed crates with U.S. military serial numbers being handed over to men who were definitely not American soldiers. "This looks like," Noah started. "Illegal weapons transfers," Morgan finished, her voice tight. "Someone selling American weapons to, who knows, local warlords? Insurgents?" The handwritten note was in the same neat script as Ryan's restoration logs. "Third shipment documented. Confirmed link to Harrison through Westbrook Holdings. Evidence secured on drive. If anything happens to me, route through Martinez. Never trust the regular channels." Morgan looked at Noah, whose face had gone pale. "Harrison?" Like Senator William Harrison, the guy who chairs the Defense Committee? And Westbrook, Morgan said slowly. That's Ryan's last name. You think he was investigating his own family? Noah asked. Morgan's mind was racing. I don't know, but I think Ryan found something he wasn't supposed to find, and I think it might have gotten him killed. The flash drive felt suddenly heavier in her hand, a digital ghost carrying secrets from the grave. Morgan turned it over, noting a small inscription etched into the metal. Truth costs. Silence costs more. The office computer was old but functional. Morgan plugged in the flash drive, half expecting it to be corrupted after years hidden in the car. Instead, a folder opened, revealing dozens of files, financial records, more photographs, and a video file dated May 17, 2008. With trembling fingers, Morgan clicked on the video file. The screen filled with Ryan Westbrook's face, younger than in the last photo James had shared, but with the same determined eyes. He was in what looked like a military tent, speaking quietly into the camera. If you're watching this, then I didn't make it back, and someone found my insurance policy, he began, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. What I'm about to share will put whoever has this in danger. If that's you, I'm sorry, but I couldn't leave this world knowing what I know without trying to make it right. Ryan explained how he'd been assigned to inventory and track weapons shipments, but noticed discrepancies. Weapons logged as destroyed that were actually being diverted. Following the paper trail, he discovered a complex operation involving senior military officials, defense contractors, and even members of Congress. The operation is called Sandstorm, Ryan continued. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's moving millions in military hardware to private buyers. The money flows through shell companies, eventually landing in offshore accounts. One of those companies is Westbrook Holdings, operated by my uncle, Victor Westbrook. Morgan and Noah exchanged shocked glances. James had never mentioned a brother. My uncle works directly with Senator William Harrison, who chairs the Defense Committee and approves the very weapons contracts they're exploiting. I've documented transactions, photographed shipments, and copied financial records proving their involvement. Ryan's expression darkened. They know I'm on to them. Yesterday, my CO pulled me from rotation without explanation. I've been receiving warnings from friends that questions are being asked about me. I don't know who I can trust anymore. He leaned closer to the camera. If my father is still alive, get this information to him. He'll know what to do. If not, there's a former Army nurse named Ellie Martinez who served with my unit last year. She knows parts of this and can help. Trust no one else, especially not my Uncle Victor. The video ended with Ryan looking directly into the camera, his final words burning into Morgan's consciousness. Whoever you are, I'm sorry to put this burden on you, but the truth has to matter. Otherwise, what the hell are we fighting for? The office fell silent as the video ended. Morgan sat back in her chair, mind reeling with implications. Noah stood frozen beside her, his usual energy subdued by the gravity of what they'd witnessed. Jesus, Noah finally whispered. What do we do with this? Before Morgan could answer, the sound of tires on gravel outside made them both jump. Through the front window, they saw a black sedan with government plates pulling up to the garage. Morgan quickly ejected the flash drive and slipped it into her pocket. Not a word about this, she warned Noah, who nodded nervously. The bell above the door chimed as a man in a suit entered. Tall, fit, with the bearing of someone used to authority, he surveyed the garage with calculated interest before focusing on Morgan. Morgan Reed? He asked, though it wasn't really a question. I understand you recently acquired a 1965 Ford Mustang. I'd like to discuss purchasing it from you. Morgan crossed her arms. Not for sale? And you are? The man smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Victor Westbrook. And I think you'll want to hear my offer before making that decision. At the name, Morgan felt a chill run down her spine. Ryan's uncle. The man implicated in the illegal weapons operation. The man Ryan had explicitly warned not to trust. Victor approached the Mustang, running his hand along the fender with familiarity. My nephew loved this car. After his tragic accident, the family lost track of it. I've been looking for it for some time, sentimental reasons, you understand. Accident? Morgan echoed, careful to keep her voice neutral. Ryan's helicopter crashed during a night operation, Victor said smoothly. Terrible loss. He was a fine soldier. Morgan studied Victor carefully. The family resemblance to James was there. Same tall frame, similar features. But where James carried his grief openly, Victor wore his authority like armor. As I said, it's not for sale. Morgan moved slightly to position herself between Victor and the workbench, where the documents were still spread out. I've already invested time and money into the restoration. Victor reached into his jacket, producing a checkbook. I'm prepared to offer $25,000, more than fair for a vehicle in this condition, plus generous compensation for your time. The amount was staggering, nearly enough to save the garage from foreclosure. Morgan felt Noah's eyes on her, silently questioning. Why now? Morgan asked instead of responding to the offer. It's been 15 years since Ryan died. Something flickered across Victor's face, annoyance perhaps at being questioned. My brother James recently informed me the car had been sold. Family heirlooms should remain in the family, don't you think? James didn't seem interested in keeping it in the family when he arranged the sale, Morgan pointed out. Victor's smile tightened. My brother has never fully recovered from Ryan's death. He doesn't always act in his best interests. He uncapped his pen. Shall we say 30,000? That should cover any outstanding debts on this. He glanced around the garage with barely disguised disdain. Establishment. The precision of the figure exactly matching her mortgage debt sent a warning flare through Morgan's mind. There was no way he could know that amount unless he'd been investigating her finances. Mr. Westbrook, Morgan said firmly, I appreciate the offer, but this project has personal meaning to me now. The car isn't for sale at any price. Victor recapped his pen slowly, his expression hardening. Ms. Reed, I admire your dedication, but you should consider your position carefully. Small businesses like yours operate at the mercy of so many factors: bank loans, insurance rates, local ordinances. The threat in his words was barely veiled. I'd hate to see your passion project become a financial burden you can't sustain. He placed his business card on the workbench. Think about it overnight. My offer expires tomorrow. With a final glance at the Mustang, he turned and left, the bell chiming with inappropriate cheerfulness as the door closed behind him. Morgan waited until the black sedan had disappeared down the road before releasing the breath she'd been holding. That was Ryan's uncle? Noah asked incredulously. The guy from the video? He just threatened you. Morgan picked up Victor's business card. It identified him as Colonel Victor Westbrook, returned, Special Advisor, Defense Logistics Agency. He knows something's in the car, Morgan said quietly. That wasn't just about family sentiment. What are we going to do? Noah's voice had risen an octave. That guy is connected. He could crush this place with one phone call. Morgan looked at the Mustang, then at the documents still spread on her workbench. The faces of the dead seemed to watch her. Ryan Westbrook, her sister Amanda, her father, Bumung, all people who had stood for something, who had refused to back down when it mattered. We're going to keep restoring the car, she said finally, and we're going to find James Westbrook. If anyone deserves to know what his son discovered, it's him. Noah looked uncertain. And after that? Morgan slipped the flash drive deeper into her pocket, feeling its weight like a promise. After that, we make sure Ryan didn't die for nothing. The bell above the door chimed again, making them both jump. But instead of Victor's imposing figure, an elderly woman stood in the doorway. Her silver hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and despite her age, somewhere in her 60s, she carried herself with the straight-back posture of someone used to crisis and command. Is this Reed's Auto Repair? She asked, her eyes scanning the garage until they landed on the partially dismantled Mustang. Something like recognition flickered across her face. Yes, Morgan replied cautiously. Can I help you? The woman approached, extending her hand. My name is Ellie Martinez. I believe we need to talk about Ryan Westbrook. Morgan stared at the woman standing before her, the name echoing in her mind like a thunderclap. Ellie Martinez, the exact person Ryan had mentioned in his video. The one person he said could be trusted. How did you find me? Morgan asked, instinctively moving to block the documents still spread on her workbench. Ellie's sharp eyes missed nothing. James Westbrook called me. Said someone had finally bought Ryan's Mustang. Someone who might actually restore it properly. She stepped closer to the car, running a weathered hand along the fender with unexpected tenderness. I was the nurse who treated Ryan during his second deployment. We became friends. Noah hovered nearby, uncertain whether to see this newcomer as an ally or another threat. James didn't mention you. James is careful about who he trusts these days. Ellie turned her attention to Morgan. Just as you should be, especially after receiving a visit from Victor Westbrook. Morgan felt a chill. You know about that? I was parked down the street, waited until he left. Ellie's expression hardened. Victor has spent 15 years making sure his nephew's questions stay buried. If he's here offering money for this car, it means you found something. The directness caught Morgan off guard. She glanced at Noah, who gave a slight nod, a silent agreement to trust this woman, at least provisionally. Ryan left evidence, Morgan confirmed, keeping her voice low despite the empty garage. Documents about something called Operation Sandstorm, weapons being diverted, sold illegally, and a video message implicating his uncle and Senator Harrison. Ellie closed her eyes briefly, as if receiving confirmation of something long suspected. Ryan contacted me 2 days before he died, said he had proof of what was happening, but needed help getting it to the right people. We arranged to meet, but he never showed. Her voice remained steady, but pain flickered across her features. The next day we received word his helicopter had crashed during a night operation. No survivors. You didn't believe it was an accident, Morgan stated. Too convenient, too clean. Ellie's eyes were sharp with remembered anger. The crash site was immediately restricted. No independent investigation. Bodies returned sealed in their caskets with orders they remain that way. She looked directly at Morgan. Ryan was investigating his own uncle, a decorated colonel with high-level Pentagon connections, and a powerful senator who chairs the Defense Committee. People who can make problems disappear. Morgan thought about Victor's thinly veiled threats, the precise knowledge of her mortgage debt. Why come forward now? It's been 15 years. Because Ryan planned for this moment. Ellie gestured toward the Mustang. He told me if anything happened to him, the truth would be in the car. But not just anywhere in the car. Somewhere only a skilled mechanic doing a complete restoration would find it. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Ryan was clever that way, patient. He knew the car would eventually change hands, and when it did, there was a chance the right person would find what he'd hidden. Morgan felt the weight of Ryan's planning, his foresight reaching across time to this moment. How can we trust you? Instead of answering directly, Ellie rolled up her sleeve, revealing a small tattoo on her forearm, a phoenix rising from flames with the words, "Truth costs, silence costs more," beneath it. The same phrase that's on the flash drive, Noah whispered. It was something Ryan used to say. Ellie rolled her sleeve back down. 6 of us got these tattoos after his death. A promise to keep looking for the truth no matter how long it took. Morgan made her decision. She retrieved the documents in the flash drive, showing Ellie everything they'd discovered so far. The older woman examined each piece methodically, with the practiced eye of someone used to analyzing evidence. This confirms what we suspected, but it's still not enough for a formal investigation, Ellie finally said. These documents establish the existence of Operation Sandstorm and show Victor's involvement, but they don't definitively connect Senator Harrison or provide enough detail about the financial trails. She tapped the flash drive. The video is Ryan's testimony, but without corroborating evidence, it's just one soldier's claim. Noah looked dejected. So it's useless? Not useless, Ellie corrected, but incomplete. Ryan was thorough. If he went to the trouble of hiding this, there's more. Have you fully examined the engine compartment yet? Morgan shook her head. We've only just started. The engine's seized, so we need to remove it completely. Then that's your next step. Ellie stood up, suddenly businesslike. Continue the restoration as if nothing has changed. If Victor is watching, and he is, any deviation from normal patterns will alert him. And what will you be doing? Morgan asked. Reaching out to the others with these tattoos. They've been waiting for this day too. Ellie headed for the door, then paused. Be careful who you trust, Morgan. This garage isn't secure. Don't leave any evidence here overnight and watch for surveillance. Her expression softened slightly. Ryan would be grateful it's you who found his car. He had a sixth sense about people. After Ellie left, Morgan and Noah stared at each other in stunned silence. So we're what? Caught in some military conspiracy now? Noah finally asked, his voice cracking. Morgan looked at the Mustang, seeing it now not just as a restoration project, but as a message in a bottle cast into time by a dead soldier. Looks that way. Should we just stop, give the car to Victor, take the money? The question hung in the air. The practical answer was obvious. $30,000 would save the garage, and walking away from whatever Ryan had uncovered would certainly be safer. But Morgan thought of her sister Amanda, who had once told her that the measure of a person wasn't what they did when things were easy, but the stand they took when it cost them something. No, Morgan said firmly. We keep going. We find whatever else Ryan hid in this car, and we make sure the truth comes out. Noah looked relieved, as if he'd expected that answer, but needed to hear it confirmed. So we pull the engine? Morgan nodded, already reaching for her tools. We pull the engine. The work was grueling but focused. They rigged a makeshift engine hoist using the garage's ceiling beams and a chain winch. Hour by hour, they disconnected hoses, removed belts, separated the transmission, and unbolted motor mounts. By midnight, the straight six-engine hung suspended above its former home, decades of grime and corrosion revealing the story of a machine that had once run beautifully before being consigned to silence. As they lowered the engine onto a waiting cradle, Morgan noticed something unusual about the firewall, the metal barrier separating the engine compartment from the passenger cabin. A small section looked slightly different, the wells newer than the surrounding metal. Noah, bring the light closer, she requested, running her fingers along the suspicious area. The young apprentice directed a work light as Morgan tapped the metal, listening to the sound. Blue the firewall returned a solid, dead sound, but this section resonated differently. Hollow. Someone modified this, she murmured, and recently, compared to the rest of the car. Using a metal punch and hammer, Morgan carefully created a small hole in the center of the suspicious panel. When she shined a penlight through, the beam illuminated a small cavity that shouldn't exist, and within it, the gleam of something metallic. With meticulous precision, they cut along the newer welds, removing a rectangular section of the firewall. Inside was a waterproof metal container, military-grade like the document tube they'd found earlier, but larger. Ryan really didn't want anyone finding this accidentally, Noah remarked, his voice hushed with anticipation. Morgan carefully extracted the container. It was surprisingly heavy, secured with a combination lock. We need the combination. Try the date on his letter, Noah suggested, or his birthday. They tried several logical combinations without success. Morgan sat back frustrated. There must be something we're missing. What about... Noah hesitated, then pointed to the flash drive inscription. The phrase, truth costs, silence costs more. Maybe it's a numeric code based on that? It seemed far-fetched, but they had nothing to lose. Morgan tried translating the first letters of each word, TC, S, C, into numbers based on their position in the alphabet, 20 to 3, 19, 3, 13. The lock clicked open. Inside the container, they found a laptop, military issue, rugged, designed to withstand extreme conditions, along with a portable hard drive and a handwritten note in Ryan's now familiar handwriting. The complete file, account numbers, transfer records, names, password, Amanda's birthday, reversed. Morgan stared at the note, uncomprehending. Amanda? Who's Amanda? Your sister, Noah answered, equally confused. But how would Ryan know about her? A chill ran through Morgan as she realized the implications. He wouldn't. This note isn't for us. It's for someone else, someone who would know this Amanda's birthday. Then how are we supposed to access these files? Morgan had no answer. They had found Ryan's evidence cache, but it remained tantalizingly locked behind an unknown password. She carefully repacked everything into the container. We need to get this somewhere safe tonight. Victor knows we have the car. It's only a matter of time before he makes another move. They locked up the garage, Morgan taking the metal container and flash drive with her while Noah brought the documents. The night was cool and quiet as they loaded everything into Morgan's truck. The small town of Pinewood, seemingly oblivious to the deadly secrets being unearthed in its midst. Morgan dropped Noah at his father's modest house with instructions to keep the documents hidden and not to come to the garage until she called the next morning. She then drove the long way home, taking random turns and doubling back several times to ensure she wasn't followed. Her small apartment above a former hardware store offered little security, but she had few options. She hid the container and flash drive in the loose floorboard beneath her bed, a hiding spot she'd created years ago for emergency cash. As she finally lay down to sleep, her mind raced with questions. Who was the Amanda in Ryan's note? How deeply was Victor involved? And most pressing, what would their next move be? Morning came too quickly, the sun barely cresting the horizon when Morgan's phone rang. It was Noah, his voice tight with panic. "Someone broke into my house last night," he said without preamble. "They tore the place apart. Dad's pretty shaken up." Morgan sat bolt upright. "The documents?" "Safe. I hid them in my car before going inside." "But Morgan, they left a message. Spray painted on my bedroom wall. Return what isn't yours. Are you hurt? Your dad?" "We're okay. Dad slept through most of it. The meds he takes for pain. I was in the garage checking the documents when I heard them inside." Noah's voice trembled slightly. "Police are here now, but don't tell them anything about the Mustang or the documents," Morgan instructed. "Say it was a random break-in. I'll be there in 20 minutes." Morgan dressed quickly, retrieving the container and flash drive from beneath the floorboard. As she hurried to her truck, she scanned the street for unfamiliar vehicles or watching eyes. Nothing seemed immediately suspicious, but the morning shadows offered plenty of hiding places. Noah's house was a modest single-story home in his working-class neighborhood. When Morgan arrived, a police cruiser was parked in the driveway, lights flashing lazily. Inside, an officer was taking statements, while Noah's father, a lean man with a prosthetic leg visible beneath his shorts, sat rigidly on the couch, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Morgan," Noah said with obvious relief when she entered, "this is Officer Diaz. He's taking our statement." The officer nodded politely. "Ms. Reed, Noah says you're his employer?" "That's right. I came as soon as he called." Morgan kept her tone neutral, betraying nothing of the panic churning inside her. "Has anything been taken?" "Nothing valuable," Mr. Chen answered before the officer could. "They weren't here to steal. They were sending a message." Officer Diaz looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Chen, as I explained, without evidence of targeted harassment." "My son works on old cars," Mr. Chen interrupted, his military bearing evident despite his disability. "Someone breaks in and paints 'Return what isn't yours' on his wall. That's not random, officer." Morgan intervened smoothly. "Noah's been helping me restore a classic Mustang. It's valuable. Maybe someone's trying to intimidate him into backing off the project." Not entirely a lie, but far from the complete truth. The officer seemed relieved at this explanation. "That makes more sense. We've had issues with parts theft from restoration projects before. Rare components can fetch good money in certain markets." He flipped his notebook closed. "I'll file the report. In the meantime, you might want to consider better security for both your home." After the officer left, Mr. Chen turned his penetrating gaze on Morgan. "Now tell me what's really going on. The truth this time." Noah looked to Morgan, silently asking how much to reveal. She considered her options carefully. Robert Chen was a former Marine who'd lost his leg in Iraq. If anyone might understand the weight of military honor and the importance of exposing wrongdoing, it would be him. "Sir," Morgan began respectfully, "the car Noah's helping me restore belonged to a soldier named Ryan Westbrook. He died in Afghanistan 15 years ago under suspicious circumstances after discovering evidence of illegal weapons sales involving high-ranking officials." Robert's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened. "And you found this evidence?" "Some of it, hidden in the car. We believe there's more." Robert was silent for a long moment, then nodded once. "That explains the break-in. Military or contractors?" "Probably contractors," Morgan answered, surprised by his immediate understanding. "Ryan's uncle is involved, Colonel Victor Westbrook." Recognition flashed across Robert's face. "Victor Westbrook? Tall, imposing, always impeccably dressed. Morgan tensed. You know him? I served under him briefly before my last deployment. Robert's voice had gone cold. He visited me in the hospital after I lost my leg, offered me a security position with a private contractor once I recovered, said it would be less demanding than active service. Did you take it? Noah asked. Robert shook his head. Something felt off. The pay was too good, the requirements too vague. He leaned forward. If Victor Westbrook is involved in this, you're in serious danger. He doesn't leave loose ends. We can't just walk away, Morgan insisted. Ryan died trying to expose this. I'm not suggesting you walk away. Robert's voice was steady. I'm suggesting you get smart about how you proceed. He turned to Noah. Pack a bag. You're staying with your aunt in Columbus for a few days. Dad, no. This isn't a debate, son. Robert's tone left no room for argument. You've already been targeted once. It won't stop there. Morgan felt a stab of guilt. She'd involved Noah without fully considering the dangers. He's right, Noah. It's not safe for you here right now. Noah looked betrayed. What about you and the Mustang? I'll continue the restoration. Maintain appearances. Morgan tried to sound more confident than she felt. Anyone watching will see business as usual. Robert studied Morgan with the assessing gaze of a combat veteran. You need a secure location for whatever evidence you've found, and you need allies. He stood with the help of a cane. Give me a few hours to make some calls. There are people who owe me favors, people who won't appear on Westbrook's radar. As Noah reluctantly packed a bag, Morgan and Robert spoke in low voices in the kitchen. He provided names of former Marines now working in private security who might help, people he trusted with his life, and now potentially with hers. There's one more thing, Morgan said hesitantly. Ryan left a note about password-protected files. It mentions someone named Amanda, says the password is her birthday reversed. Does that mean anything to you? Robert frowned. Amanda, no, doesn't ring any bells. Military personnel? Possibly. The note was meant for someone specific, someone who would know this Amanda's birthday without being told. Could be a girlfriend, a sister, a comrade. Robert shrugged. Military units become family. Ryan might have been close to someone with that name. The name nagged at Morgan throughout the day as she drove Noah to the bus station, ensuring he boarded safely for Columbus. Her own sister had been Amanda, a coincidence that felt significant yet offered no practical help, as her Amanda would have had no connection to Ryan Westbrook. Back at the garage, Morgan forced herself to focus on the restoration work. Anyone watching would see a mechanic going about her business, ordering parts, cleaning components, documenting the process. But her mind continuously circled back to the hidden laptop and its locked secrets. She was deep in the process of cleaning the seized engine block when James Westbrook returned. He entered quietly, standing just inside the door until Morgan noticed him. Mr. Westbrook, she greeted him, wiping her hands on a shop rag. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. James approached slowly, his face grave. I received a call from my brother Victor yesterday. Said he'd made you a generous offer for Ryan's car. His eyes searched hers. He seemed quite upset that you refused. Morgan tensed, unsure how much to reveal. James was Ryan's father, but family ties didn't guarantee loyalty. I told him I'd already started the restoration, that it had become important to me. Important enough to risk your business? James asked quietly. Victor doesn't make idle threats, Ms. Reed. The directness of his question surprised her. You know about that? I know my brother. James moved closer to the Mustang, running his hand along the fender where the engine once sat. We haven't been close since Ryan died, but I know how he operates. If he wants this car, it's not for sentimental reasons. Morgan made a split-second decision. Your son left something in this car, Mr. Westbrook. Evidence about illegal weapons sales in Afghanistan. Operation Sandstorm. Evidence implicating your brother and Senator Harrison. She expected shock, perhaps disbelief. Instead, James closed his eyes briefly, a look of pained vindication crossing his features. So he did find proof. I always believed him, but without evidence. You knew? Morgan asked, incredulous. Ryan called me a week before he died. Said he'd discovered something terrible, something involving Victor. He wouldn't give details over the phone, said it wasn't secure, promised to explain everything when he got home. James's voice roughened. He never made it home. The helicopter crash. James nodded grimly. The official report said mechanical failure during a night operation. No survivors, no witnesses. Case closed. His hands clenched into fists. Victor arranged the funeral, handled everything with the military. Wouldn't let me see the body. Said it was too damaged, that I should remember Ryan as he was. You suspected it wasn't an accident, Morgan stated. I knew my son. He was careful, methodical. He wouldn't have gotten on a helicopter if something wasn't right. James looked directly at her. I've spent 15 years trying to prove what happened to him. 15 years hitting walls, being dismissed as a grieving father unable to accept reality. Morgan thought about the evidence they'd found, the documents, the video, the locked laptop. Ryan left a message about password-protected files, said the password was Amanda's birthday, reversed. Does that name mean anything to you? James stiffened, his expression changing dramatically. Amanda? You're sure that's the name? Positive. It was in his handwriting. James seemed suddenly unsteady, reaching for the workbench to support himself. Amanda was Ryan's sister, his twin sister. Morgan felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. Sister? You never mentioned he had a sister. Because she died when they were 16. James's voice was barely above a whisper. Car accident. Ryan was driving. He survived. She didn't. He never forgave himself. The revelation hit Morgan like a physical blow. Ryan had hidden his most crucial evidence behind a password only his father would understand. The birthday of a sister whose death had shaped his life. Mr. Westbrook, Morgan said carefully, I found a laptop hidden in the firewall. Military grade, password protected. If Amanda was Ryan's twin, they shared a birthday? James nodded slowly. July 8th, 1982. Reverse, that would be 289180U70, Morgan calculated quickly. We need to access those files. What files? What exactly did Ryan find? James demanded. Before Morgan could answer, the sound of tires on gravel outside froze them both. Through the window, Morgan saw a familiar black sedan pulling up to the garage. It's Victor, she whispered urgently. He can't know we found anything. Follow my lead. As the bell above the door announced Victor's arrival, Morgan smoothly positioned herself at the workbench, pretending to be showing James a parts catalog. Victor entered with the same commanding presence as before, though today he wore casual clothes, an expensive polo shirt and slacks that somehow only emphasized his military bearing. James, Victor greeted his brother with apparent warmth. I didn't expect to find you here. Just checking on Ryan's car, James replied, his voice remarkably steady, despite the tension Morgan could see in his shoulders. Ms. Reed has been keeping me updated on the restoration progress. Victor's gaze swept the garage, noting the removed engine and disassembled components with calculating precision. Progress indeed, though it seems like such a tremendous undertaking for a small operation like this. He turned to Morgan. Have you reconsidered my offer? Still not for sale, Morgan answered firmly. As I told you yesterday. Unfortunate. Victor produced an envelope from his pocket. Perhaps this might change your mind. He handed the envelope to Morgan, who opened it cautiously. Inside was a foreclosure notice from First National Bank, dated tomorrow. Her stomach dropped. The bank had moved up the foreclosure timeline by 2 months. Banking regulations can be so complicated, Victor said with false sympathy, especially when reviewing high-risk loans. Fortunately, as a preferred customer, I might be able to intervene if we could come to an arrangement about the Mustang. The threat was no longer veiled. It was direct, immediate, and potentially devastating. Without the garage, Morgan had nothing. No livelihood, no place to complete the restoration, no way to honor her promise to either Ryan or her father. James stepped forward, a sudden hardness in his expression. That's enough, Victor. This strong-arm routine might work with contractors and politicians, but not with family. Family? Victor's smile was cold. Is that what we are, James? After all these years of your accusations and suspicions? After you've spent more than a decade trying to smear my reputation with wild theories about Ryan's death? Not so wild, apparently, James shot back. If you're this desperate to get your hands on his car. The tension between the brothers crackled like electricity. Morgan sensed years of unspoken conflict beneath their words, a family fracture that had never healed. Victor's expression hardened. Be careful, James. Grief has already cost you enough. Don't let it cost you what little you have left. He turned to Morgan. You have until tomorrow to accept my offer. After that, the bank takes everything. After Victor left, Morgan slumped against the workbench, the foreclosure notice clutched in her hand. He's accelerated the timeline. I had 90 days, now I have hours. James looked shaken but resolute. We need to see what's on that laptop, now. As dusk fell over the small town, Morgan and James sat in her apartment, the military laptop open between them. James had entered his daughter's reverse birthday, and the screen had come to life, revealing dozens of files meticulously organized and labeled. This is it, Morgan breathed as they began exploring the contents. Everything Ryan discovered about Operation Sandstorm. The files were comprehensive. Financial records showing millions in diverted funds, photographs of weapons with serial numbers that matched those reported destroyed, email exchanges between Victor and various contractors discussing shipment details. Most damning were recorded conversations between Victor and Senator Harrison, explicitly discussing how to hide the operation from oversight committees. My God, James whispered, his face ashen as the evidence of his brother's corruption unfolded before him. Ryan found all this, and they killed him for it. Morgan opened a folder labeled Failsafe and found a video file dated the day before Ryan's death. When she played it, Ryan's face appeared on screen, tense, exhausted, but determined. Dad, if you're watching this, then my worst fears have come true, he began, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. Everything you need is here. The complete Operation Sandstorm files, account numbers, names, dates. I've sent copies to secure locations, but this is the master file, the one that can't be denied or dismissed. Ryan leaned closer to the camera, his expression intensifying. Uncle Victor is deeply involved. He's been using Westbrook Holdings as a shell company to move money and weapons. Senator Harrison provides political cover and profits through offshore accounts. They've built an entire shadow operation using military resources. He paused, swallowing hard. I've tried going through proper channels, but I've hit walls at every turn. Someone's protecting them. If anything happens to me, don't trust the official story, and don't trust Victor, no matter what he says. The video ended with Ryan looking directly into the camera, his final words landing like a physical blow. I'm sorry, Dad. I tried to do the right thing, just like you always taught us. For Amanda, for all of us. James sat motionless, tears streaming silently down his weathered face as the screen went dark. The mention of Amanda, the daughter he had lost decades ago, seemed to break something open inside him. He was always the best of us, James said finally, his voice rough with emotion. Always trying to make things right, even after Amanda. Morgan gave him a moment to collect himself before asking the critical question. What do we do now? Victor's giving us until tomorrow, and this evidence is 15 years old. Will anyone even care anymore? Someone will care, James said with sudden conviction. Ryan mentioned sending copies to secure locations. There must be others who've been waiting for this evidence to surface. Ellie Martinez, Morgan remembered. The nurse. Ryan trusted her. As if summoned by her name, Morgan's phone rang, the screen showing an unknown number. When she answered, Ellie's voice came through, tense and urgent. Morgan, listen carefully. Your garage isn't safe. Victor's men were just there planting something in the Mustang. I watched them from across the street. You can't go back there tonight. Morgan's blood ran cold. What did they plant? I couldn't get close enough to see, but whatever their plan is, it's happening now. Where are you? My apartment with James Westbrook. We've accessed the laptop. Ellie, there's extensive evidence. Good. Stay where you are. I'm coming to you with someone who can help. Ellie paused. And Morgan? Arm yourself if you can. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about survival. The call ended, leaving Morgan and James in stunned silence. Through the window, Morgan could see the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, the small town settling into its evening routine, oblivious to the deadly game unfolding in its midst. "They're making their move," James said grimly. Morgan nodded, a strange calm settling over her. The fight was coming, whether she was ready or not. Some legacies weren't built of metal and chrome, but of courage and conviction. As Morgan prepared for whatever would come next, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not be the one to let that legacy die. Night had fully descended on the small town when headlights swept across Morgan's apartment window. She peered cautiously through the blinds, tensing until she recognized Ellie Martinez's practical sedan pulling up alongside the curb. The former military nurse wasn't alone. A man in his early 30s stepped out of the passenger side, tall, with the unmistakable bearing of military training despite his civilian clothes. "That's Ellie," Morgan confirmed to James, who had positioned himself near the door, a baseball bat gripped tightly in his hands. The past hour had been spent in tense preparation, backing up Ryan's files to multiple drives, gathering what few valuables mattered, and improvising weapons from household items. A gentle knock followed by a distinctive pattern. 3 quick taps, pause, 2 more, signaled Ellie's arrival. Morgan had insisted on this precaution, paranoia rapidly becoming prudence as the stakes escalated. She opened the door cautiously, relief washing over her at the sight of Ellie's familiar face. The man behind her remained expressionless, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "This is Michael Ramirez," Ellie introduced him once they were inside with the door locked. "Former Marine Force Recon, now private security, one of the few people I trust completely." Ramirez nodded curtly to both Morgan and James. "Miss Martinez briefed me on the situation. We need to move quickly. Colonel Westbrook has significant resources at his disposal." "We've accessed the laptop," Morgan said, gesturing to where it sat open on her kitchen table. "It's all here, financial records, communications, photographic evidence, 15 years worth of illegal weapons deals, millions in diverted funds." Ramirez examined the files with professional efficiency while Ellie filled them in on what she'd witnessed at the garage. 2 men in plain clothes, professional types. They worked quickly, knew exactly where they were going. One kept watch while the other did something to the Mustang's fuel system. "Sabotage?" James asked, his face pale with anger. "Most likely," Ramirez confirmed without looking up from the laptop. "Standard procedure when eliminating evidence. Make it look like an accident. Faulty wiring causes a fire, destroying the garage and anything inside it." Morgan felt sick. "The whole building could go up. There's an apartment above the garage. An elderly couple lives there. Collateral damage wouldn't concern men like these," Ramirez said grimly. "We need to secure this evidence and get you all to safety, tonight." "What about the Mustang?" Morgan insisted. "We can't just leave it to be destroyed." "The car isn't worth your life," Ramirez countered. "It's not about the car," James interjected, his voice quiet but firm. "It's about what it represents. Ryan died trying to expose this corruption. That Mustang was his legacy, his message in a bottle. I won't let them erase it like they tried to erase him." Ellie and Ramirez exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. "There might be a way," Ramirez finally said, "but it's risky. We'd need to move fast, create a diversion, extract the vehicle before they can implement it whatever they've planned." Morgan was already grabbing her jacket. "I've got a flatbed trailer at the garage. We could load the Mustang tonight, move it somewhere safe." "You realize this makes you a direct target," Ramirez warned. "Right now, they might still be trying to maintain plausible deniability. The moment you actively counter their plans, that changes. They'll come after you directly." The gravity of his words hung in the air. Morgan thought about the foreclosure notice, about her father's legacy, about the elderly couple sleeping above her garage, unaware of the danger. She thought about Noah, safely away in Columbus, and wondered if she'd ever see him again, if this went wrong. Then she thought about Ryan Westbrook, who had faced similar choices and chosen truth over safety, about her sister Amanda, who had run toward danger when others fled, about her father who had taught her that some principles weren't negotiable, regardless of cost. "I'm already a target," she said firmly. Let's do this. 40 minutes later, a four-vehicle convoy approached Reed's auto repair from different directions. Ramirez had made several calls, activating what he called his emergency response team, fellow veterans who operated outside official channels when necessary. They communicated via encrypted radios, their movements coordinated with military precision. Morgan drove her truck with the flatbed trailer, heart pounding as she approached the darkened garage. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat, every passing car a potential enemy. Ramirez's instructions had been explicit. Approach normally, no unusual behavior to alert any watchers, act as if she'd simply forgotten something at work. She pulled into the small lot and used her key to unlock the side entrance, flipping on only the bare minimum of lights. Normal behavior for a quick retrieval. Once inside, she moved quickly to the main bay, where the partially disassembled Mustang sat silently in the darkness. "I'm in," she whispered into the small radio clipped to her jacket. No sign of anyone inside. "Roger that," Ramirez's voice crackled back. "Two vehicles on surveillance, north and east corners. We're in position to intercept if necessary. Proceed with loading." Morgan activated the large bay door, its mechanical rumble sounding impossibly loud in the quiet night. As it rose, she saw Ellie's sedan and an unfamiliar pickup truck backing into position, their drivers ready to help with the extraction. Working quickly, they secured the Mustang's chassis to a rolling dolly, a challenging task with the engine removed, but Morgan had prepared for this contingency. Years of moving partially restored vehicles had taught her the tricks of balancing and distributing weight properly. "Movement at the north corner," Ramirez warned through the radio. "Black SUV, two occupants. They've noticed the activity." Morgan's hands trembled slightly as she tightened the last securing strap. "Almost ready to load. 2 more minutes." "You don't have 2 minutes," Ramirez replied tensely, vehicle approaching from the north. "Fast." James appeared at her side, helping to guide the rolling chassis toward the trailer. "We need a diversion," he muttered. As if in answer to his words, the night erupted with the sound of screeching tires and a metallic crash. Through the open bay door, Morgan glimpsed one of Ramirez's team deliberately T-boning the approaching SUV, blocking its path to the garage. "Load now," Ramirez's voice commanded over the radio. Working frantically, Morgan, James, and Ellie managed to roll the Mustang onto the flatbed. The chassis was awkward without its engine, requiring all their strength to maneuver safely. Morgan secured it with heavy-duty straps while James and Ellie gathered the removed parts they could quickly manage. The engine block was too heavy, but smaller components were hastily loaded into the bed of her truck. "We've got company," Ellie warned, pointing toward the street where two men were approaching on foot, having abandoned their damaged SUV. Even from a distance, their purposeful stride and the distinctive bulges beneath their jackets signaled weapons and intent. "Go," Ramirez ordered over the radio. "Route 2 as planned. We'll cover your exit." Morgan jumped into her truck, James climbing into the passenger seat beside her. The engine roared to life and she reversed carefully, mindful of the precious cargo on her trailer. Through her rear-view mirror, she saw Ramirez and another man intercepting the approaching figures, a brief confrontation that quickly escalated into physical violence. "Don't look back," James advised as Morgan hesitated. "Trust them to do their job." She nodded grimly and accelerated away from the garage, following the predetermined escape route. Ellie's sedan fell in behind them, providing escort and blocking any pursuit. They wound through back streets, avoiding main roads where cameras might track their movements, eventually merging onto a country highway leading out of town. "Where exactly are we going?" Morgan asked James, realizing she'd never been told their destination. "Safe house about 40 miles from here," James replied, checking the side mirrors for pursuit. "Former military property, now privately owned by someone Ramirez trusts. Off-grid, defensible position." Morgan drove in tense silence, constantly checking her mirrors for signs of pursuit. The radio remained quiet except for occasional status updates from Ramirez, confirming that his team had successfully disengaged and were following separate routes to the rendezvous point. The safe house turned out to be a converted bunker built into a hillside, its entrance concealed by natural landscaping and accessible only by a single dirt road. Solar panels and a small wind turbine provided off-grid power, while multiple surveillance cameras monitored the perimeter. Inside, the space was surprisingly comfortable, basic but functional living quarters surrounding a central command center filled with communications equipment. Home sweet home, Ellie commented dryly as they secured the Mustang in an underground garage. At least for the next few days. Morgan collapsed into a chair, the adrenaline crash leaving her shaky and exhausted. The night's events seemed surreal, like something from an action movie rather than her previously ordinary life. What happens now? Now we compile the evidence properly, Ramirez explained, setting up Ryan's laptop on a secure workstation. Create multiple backups, organize it for maximum impact, identify the most legally actionable offenses. And then? James asked. Then we find someone who can't be bought, threatened, or silenced to take this public. Ramirez's expression was grim. That's the hard part. Senator Harrison's influence runs deep, and Colonel Westbrook has connections throughout military intelligence. Traditional channels are compromised. What about the press? Morgan suggested. Too risky without the right contact, Ellie countered. Most major outlets have legal departments that can be pressured or corporate interests that can be leveraged. We need someone with both the platform and the personal integrity to withstand enormous pressure. They worked through the night, processing Ryan's evidence, creating secure backups, and establishing secure communication protocols. By dawn, Morgan was operating on coffee and determination alone, her eyes burning from hours of staring at financial records and military reports. You should get some rest, James told her gently. You've been going for nearly 24 hours straight. Morgan rubbed her eyes. I keep thinking about Noah and my garage. Victor will realize the Mustang is gone by now. What's stopping him from burning the place down anyway? Out of spite. Ramirez has people watching the garage, Ellie assured us. Any suspicious activity will be reported immediately. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive when Morgan finally lay down in one of the bunker's sparse bedrooms. Her mind raced with everything they discovered, everything still at risk. The faces of those caught in this expanding web of danger. Noah, his father Robert, the elderly couple above her garage, even her regular customers whose vehicles were still inside, haunted her attempts at rest. She must have eventually drifted off, because the next thing she knew, Ellie was gently shaking her awake. Morgan, we have a situation. You need to see this. Groggy and disoriented, Morgan followed Ellie to the command center where James and Ramirez were watching a news broadcast on a laptop. The local news showed Reed's Auto Repair, police cars and fire trucks surrounding the building, emergency lights painting the pre-dawn darkness in red and blue. What happened? Morgan gasped, fully awake now. Fire, Ramirez answered grimly. Started about an hour ago. By the time emergency services arrived, the main floor was fully engulfed. The couple upstairs? Morgan asked, heart in her throat. Evacuated safely, Ellie assured her. No casualties reported. Morgan watched in stunned silence as the camera panned across her life's work being consumed by flames. The garage her father had built, where she'd grown up learning to fix engines, where she'd found purpose after losing her sister. All of it disappearing into smoke and ash. They did it anyway, she whispered, even though the Mustang was gone. It's not just destruction, Ramirez pointed out. It's a message. They're telling us they can take everything from us, piece by piece. The news anchor's voice provided grim confirmation. Authorities suspect arson, though no official determination has been made. The business owner, Morgan Reed, has not been located for comment. Police are seeking her whereabouts as a person of interest in the investigation. Person of interest? Morgan echoed incredulously. They're framing me for burning down my own garage? Standard procedure, Ramirez explained. Discredit the witness, make them run, then use the flight as evidence of guilt. Classic intelligence operation. James placed a steadying hand on Morgan's shoulder. This changes things. You can't go back now, not without facing arrest. The reality of her situation crashed down on Morgan with devastating force. In less than 48 hours, she had gone from struggling small business owner to fugitive. Her livelihood destroyed, her reputation under attack, her future uncertain at best. I need some air, she muttered, heading for the bunker's exit. Outside, the morning was crisp and clear, the countryside peaceful in stark contrast to the chaos consuming her life. She leaned against the hillside, trying to process everything that had happened. Footsteps crunched on gravel as someone approached. Morgan tensed until she recognized James, his tall figure silhouetted against the rising sun. "I'm sorry about your garage," he said simply, coming to stand beside her. Morgan nodded, unable to form words around the lump in her throat. "When Ryan died," James continued quietly, "I lost everything that mattered to me. My son, my purpose, eventually my marriage. For years I was just existing, going through the motions." He gazed out at the horizon. But Ryan never gave up. Even knowing the risks, he kept fighting for what was right, left us breadcrumbs to follow when he was gone. "I'm not sure I have his courage," Morgan admitted. "You removed a partially disassembled Mustang from under armed surveillance and outran professional operatives," James pointed out with a hint of a smile. "I'd say courage isn't your problem." Despite everything, Morgan found herself smiling back. "What now, though? We have the evidence, but we're effectively in hiding. They're turning the legal system against us. How do we fight that?" Before James could answer, the bunker door opened again, and Ellie emerged with a satellite phone in hand. "Call for you, Morgan. It's Noah." Morgan took the phone with shaking hands. "Noah? Are you okay?" "I'm fine." His voice came through, tense but steady. "But there's something you need to know. I just saw the news about the garage. I'm so sorry, Morgan." "It's not your fault. Are you still in Columbus? You need to stay there. It's not safe." "That's what I'm calling about," Noah interrupted. "I got a visitor this morning, someone who says she can help. Says she knows what's going on with the Mustang and Operation Sandstorm." Morgan's blood ran cold. "Dennis, Noah, don't trust anyone right now. These people are dangerous." "She says her name is Catherine Westbrook, claims she's Ryan's cousin, Victor's daughter." The revelation hit Morgan like a physical blow. Victor's daughter, another Westbrook entering the increasingly complex web of allies and enemies. "Put her on the phone," Morgan demanded. There was a rustling sound, then a new voice, female, confident, professional. "This is Catherine Westbrook. I'm guessing you're the mechanic who found my cousin's evidence cache." "How did you find Noah?" Morgan demanded, ignoring the question. "The same way my father's people would have, by tracking known associates. Difference is, I got to him first." Catherine's tone was matter of fact. "I've been monitoring my father's communications. When the operation to retrieve Ryan's Mustang accelerated suddenly, I knew someone had found something significant." "Why should we trust you? You're Victor's daughter." "And Ryan was my cousin," Catherine countered smoothly. "I loved him. When he died, things didn't add up. I've spent years working my way into positions where I could access information. Watching my father, documenting patterns." Morgan covered the phone and whispered to James and Ellie, "It's Victor's daughter. She found Noah in Columbus." Their expressions tightened with concern. "Ask her something only someone close to the family would know," James suggested urgently. "Something about Ryan or Amanda that isn't in the official records." Morgan uncovered the phone. "If you're really Ryan's cousin, tell me about Amanda." A brief silence, then, "Amanda was Ryan's twin sister. She died in a car accident when they were 16. Ryan was driving. It was raining. A truck crossed the center line and Ryan swerved to avoid it. The car hit a tree on the passenger side." Catherine's voice softened. "Ryan had a scar on his left forearm from the crash. He used to trace it with his finger when he was thinking hard about something, like it connected him to her somehow." Morgan looked at James, who nodded confirmation, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Why are you contacting us now?" Morgan asked, still wary. "Because the operation has escalated beyond anything I've seen before," Catherine replied. "My father has mobilized resources typically reserved for high-level national security threats. Whatever Ryan hid in that Mustang has them terrified." "Where are you now?" "With Noah at his aunt's house in Columbus. But we need to move. It won't take my father's people long to track him here, especially now that the garage has been destroyed. I have a secure location we can use, and resources you'll need." Morgan hesitated, looking to Ramirez for guidance. He had been listening intently and now held out his hand for the phone. After a brief technical conversation with Catherine, he handed it back to Morgan. "She's legitimate," he confirmed. "Department of Defense analyst, high-level security clearance. I've worked with her division before." "Can we trust her?" Morgan pressed. Ramirez's expression remained carefully neutral. She could have had Noah picked up by official channels if she wanted to use him as bait. The fact that she's reaching out directly suggests genuine concern. Whether that translates to trustworthiness remains to be seen. Morgan made her decision. Catherine will text you coordinates for a meeting point. Neutral ground, public place. Bring Noah, come alone. We'll know if you're being followed. Understood. One more thing you should know. There's a journalist named Alex Winters who's been investigating military contractors for years. He's been trying to crack the Sandstorm operation since Ryan died. He might be the ally you need to take this public. The name sparked immediate recognition. Alex Winters? The one who broke the story on defense contractor fraud in Iraq? The same. He worked with Ryan briefly before his death. I've kept tabs on him. He's been gathering pieces of this puzzle for years, but never had enough for a complete picture. After ending the call, Morgan relayed the information to the others. Ramirez immediately began researching Alex Winters, confirming his reputation and track record. He's legitimate, Ramirez eventually concluded. Multiple award-winning investigations into military and government corruption. Turned down several lucrative mainstream positions to maintain his independence. If anyone has the platform and integrity to handle this story, it's him. And Catherine? James asked, his expression troubled. Can we really trust Victor's daughter? We'll take precautions, Ellie assured him. Secure meeting location, counter-surveillance measures, extraction plan if things go sideways. As they prepared for the meeting, Morgan retreated to the underground garage where the Mustang sat. Its disassembled state, a visual metaphor for how thoroughly her life had been taken apart in the past few days. She ran her hand along the frame, thinking about the young soldier who had hidden his evidence inside it, trusting that someday someone would complete the puzzle he'd begun. We're close, Ryan, she whispered to the empty car. We won't let you down. The meeting point was a busy shopping mall in a neighboring county selected for its multiple entrances, extensive security camera coverage, and constant flow of people. Morgan and Ramirez arrived 2 hours early, establishing positions and exit routes, while James and Ellie remained at the safe house, monitoring communications and ready to implement emergency protocols if necessary. Morgan sat in the food court, a baseball cap pulled low over her eyes, nursing a coffee as she scanned the crowds for familiar faces. Her heart leapt when she spotted Noah entering through the north entrance, accompanied by a professionally dressed woman in her mid-30s. Catherine Westbrook carried herself with the confident posture of someone accustomed to high-pressure situations, her alert eyes constantly surveying their surroundings, even as she maintained a casual conversation with Noah. Morgan didn't approach immediately, instead watching as they ordered food and took seats at a table with good visibility of all approaches. Ramirez, positioned at a different vantage point, confirmed through their earpieces that he detected no surveillance or pursuit. Finally satisfied, Morgan approached their table, sliding into a seat as if joining friends for lunch. Noah's face lit up with relief at the sight of her. You okay? She asked him immediately. Better now, he replied with a shaky smile. Seeing the garage on the news? I thought maybe. I'm fine, Morgan assured him, before turning her attention to Catherine. Up close, the family resemblance was striking. She had the same determined jawline as both her father and uncle, the same penetrating gaze that seemed to evaluate everything it fell upon. Thank you for coming, Catherine said without preamble. I know trusting me is difficult given the circumstances. Why are you helping us? Morgan asked directly. He's your father. Catherine's expression hardened slightly. And Ryan was my cousin, my friend. After he died, I started noticing inconsistencies in the official reports, questions that never got answered. When I pressed for details, my father shut me down completely, told me some things were better left alone. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. That's not how our family was raised. My grandfather, James and Victor's father, was a judge. His motto was, truth above all. Ryan lived by that principle. So do I. Even if the truth destroys your father? James had been explicit about not attending this meeting. His brother would have people looking specifically for him. But his question echoed in Morgan's mind. My father destroyed himself the moment he chose power and profit over honor, Catherine replied, a flash of pain crossing her features. I've spent years gathering evidence, building a case, but I've never had enough to move against someone as protected as Senator Harrison. Until now. She produced a small drive from her purse. This contains everything I've collected on Operation Sandstorm. Financial trails, personnel movements, communications intercepts. Combined with whatever Ryan left in the Mustang, it might be enough to finally expose everything. Morgan accepted the drive cautiously. You mentioned a journalist, Alex Winters. Catherine nodded. He's been pursuing this story for years, has sources inside multiple intelligence agencies, contacts throughout the contractor community. Most importantly, he has an independent publishing platform with enough reach and credibility that it can't be easily silenced. Can you arrange a meeting? Already have. He's willing to meet tomorrow. Neutral location, his choice of security precautions. Catherine hesitated, then added, there's something else you should know. The operation to recover the Mustang and eliminate evidence isn't just my father's initiative. It's being directed at the highest levels. Senator Harrison has activated resources from multiple agencies under the guise of national security concerns. Noah looked alarmed. You mean like government agencies? FBI, CIA? Not officially, Catherine clarified, but individuals within those organizations who owe Harrison favors or have been compromised in other ways. The official systems have been weaponized against you, hence the arson investigation focusing on Morgan rather than exploring other suspects. The implications were staggering. They weren't just fighting Victor Westbrook and his private contractors. They were potentially facing elements of the very governmental systems designed to uphold justice. How do we fight that? Morgan asked quietly. With absolute truth, Catherine answered. Documented, undeniable, and public enough that it can't be buried again. That's where Alex Winters comes in. Once he publishes, others will follow. The evidence will be too comprehensive to dismiss. As they finalized plans for the meeting with Winters, Morgan felt a strange sense of momentum building, as if all the scattered pieces were finally coming together towards some inevitable conclusion. Ryan's evidence, Catherine's insider knowledge, Winters' platform, combined with their small but determined alliance, it might just be enough to bring down the corruption that had claimed so many lives. What she couldn't know was that across town, in an anonymous hotel suite, Victor Westbrook was receiving an urgent update from one of his operatives. Sir, we've confirmed that Catherine has made contact with the Reed woman and the Chen boy. Victor's expression remained impassive, betraying nothing of the turmoil beneath. My daughter has made her choice then. Your orders, sir. Victor gazed out the window at the small town below, thoughts of family, duty, and survival warring behind his carefully controlled facade. Proceed as planned, he said finally, his voice devoid of emotion. No exceptions, no matter who is involved. As night fell over the countryside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, a fitting backdrop to the conflict brewing beneath the surface of this quiet corner of America. For Morgan Reed, the journey that had begun with a $600 Mustang was accelerating toward a confrontation that would change everything, if she survived to see it through. Morning light filtered through the reinforced windows of the safe house, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Morgan stood over the partially reconstructed Mustang, her hands moving with practiced precision as she reassembled what components they'd managed to salvage during their hasty escape. The work provided a semblance of normalcy amid the chaos her life had become, the familiar rhythms of restoration offering brief respite from the constant tension. Making progress? James asked, entering the underground garage with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Morgan accepted one gratefully. Slowly, without my full tools or the engine block, there's only so much I can do. She ran her hand along the Mustang's frame. But keeping her together feels important somehow, like we're keeping Ryan's legacy intact. James nodded, understanding without further explanation. He'd spent the night poring over his son's files alongside Ramirez, organizing the evidence into a compelling narrative that couldn't be easily dismissed or buried. The strain showed in the deep shadows beneath his eyes, the new lines etched into his weathered face. Catherine called, he said after a moment. The meeting with Winters is set for noon, public location but secured. She's vetted it thoroughly. Morgan wiped her hands on a shop rag, apprehension settling in her stomach. Do you trust her? Really trust her? She's still Victor's daughter. I trusted Ryan's judgment, James replied simply. He wrote about Catherine in his private notes. said she was the only member of Victor's immediate family who ever questioned the official narrative about military contracts, that she had moral courage, even when it cost her. He paused. Besides, she could have betrayed us already if that was her intention. Morgan couldn't argue with that logic. Still, years of self-reliance made trusting others, especially someone connected to the man who had destroyed her livelihood and framed her for arson, profoundly difficult. "What about Noah?" she asked, changing the subject. "Is he coming to the meeting?" Ramirez advised against it. The fewer people present, the lower the profile. Noah's staying at a separate safe location with one of Ramirez's team watching over him. Morgan nodded, relieved. The young apprentice had already been pulled too deeply into a dangerous situation not of his making. The thought of him facing further risk was unbearable. As they prepared to leave for the meeting, Ramirez gathered them for a final briefing. The former Force Recon Marine had transformed the safe house's main room into an operational center, with maps, surveillance photos, and communication equipment arranged with military precision. "This is Alex Winters," he began, displaying a photo of a lean, intense-looking man in his 40s with prematurely silver hair and watchful eyes. Pulitzer-nominated investigative journalist specializing in military and government corruption, former embedded reporter in Iraq and Afghanistan, now runs an independent news platform with significant reach and credibility. The image shifted to an overhead map. Meeting location is the Riverside Park Botanical Gardens, public but not crowded on weekdays. Multiple entry and exit points, good sight lines, difficult to establish effective surveillance without being noticed. Ramirez looked at each of them in turn, his expression grave. "Our objective is simple. Transfer the complete evidence package to Winters and secure his commitment to publish. Catherine will make introductions and vouch for our credibility. Morgan and James will present the evidence and answer any questions about its provenance." "And if something goes wrong?" Morgan asked, voicing the concern weighing on all their minds. "Emergency extraction protocols are in place. Ellie will monitor from a distance with a separate team. At the first sign of trouble, move to the nearest exit point. Vehicles are staged for rapid departure." Ramirez's tone was matter-of-fact, the scenarios clearly ones he had navigated before. "Communications will be maintained via encrypted channels. Phones remain off to prevent tracking." The clinical precision of his planning highlighted the deadly seriousness of their situation. This wasn't just a meeting with a journalist. It was a high-stakes operation with potentially life-altering consequences. They traveled separately to maintain operational security. Morgan with Ramirez in an anonymous sedan, James with Ellie in a different vehicle, taking circuitous routes to avoid potential surveillance. The botanical gardens were peaceful when they arrived, a few visitors strolling among carefully tended displays of late spring flowers, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. Catherine was already waiting at the designated meeting point, a secluded pavilion overlooking a small ornamental lake. She wore casual clothes, jeans and a light sweater, but her alert posture betrayed her military connections. When she spotted them approaching, she gave a subtle nod before turning her attention back to the man beside her. Alex Winters matched his photographs, lean and intense, with penetrating eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. He wore a rumpled blazer over a plain button-down shirt, the casual appearance of a man more concerned with substance than style. A weathered messenger bag hung at his side, doubtless containing recording equipment and notes. "Mr. Winters," Ramirez made the initial approach, assessing the journalist with professional caution. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "When Catherine mentioned Operation Sandstorm, I didn't have much choice," Winters replied, his voice carrying the slight rasp of someone who had spent too many years in dusty war zones. "I've been chasing that ghost for 15 years. Introductions were made quickly, with minimal personal details. Winter's gaze lingered on James, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Westbrook," he said thoughtfully. "Any relation to Captain Ryan Westbrook?" James stiffened slightly. "My son." Winters nodded slowly. "I interviewed him once, back in '07. Smart kid. Asked better questions than he answered. When I heard about the helicopter crash," he trailed off, then refocused. "Catherine says you have evidence concerning his death?" "More than his death," Morgan interjected. "Evidence that Operation Sandstorm was real, that it involved illegal weapons transfers facilitated by Senator Harrison and Colonel Victor Westbrook, and that Ryan was killed because he discovered it. Winter's expression revealed nothing, but his posture changed subtly, the shift of a predator catching a scent. That's a significant claim. What exactly do you have? Rather than explaining, Morgan produced a secure drive containing the combined evidence. Ryan's files from the Mustang integrated with Catherine's years of careful documentation. Financial records proving funds were diverted from legitimate military contracts to offshore accounts. She began, keeping her voice low despite the privacy of their location. Communications between Victor Westbrook and Senator Harrison explicitly discussing how to conceal shipments from oversight committees. Photographic evidence of weapons being transferred to unauthorized recipients with serial numbers matching those reported destroyed in official records. Winters didn't reach for the drive immediately. Provenance? He asked simply. My son concealed the original evidence in a 1965 Mustang before his death, James explained. Ms. Reed discovered it during restoration work. Catherine has independently verified key components through her position at the Department of Defense. And you're willing to go on record? Winters directed this question to Catherine, understanding immediately that her testimony carried particular weight given her relationship to the accused. Yes, she replied without hesitation. I've spent years documenting my father's activities, gathering evidence legally through my clearance level. I'm prepared to testify about what I've found. Winters nodded, finally accepting the drive. If this checks out, it's the biggest military corruption story since Iran-Contra, possibly bigger, given Harrison's current position and influence. He studied each of them carefully. You understand what you're doing? Once this publishes, there's no going back. These are powerful people with resources and connections most civilians can't imagine. They've already destroyed my business, framed me for arson, and threatened everyone I care about, Morgan replied evenly. Going back isn't an option anymore. They killed my son, James added, his voice quiet but firm. 15 years ago. I've been waiting for this moment every day since. Winters seemed satisfied with their resolve. I'll need 24 hours to verify and prepare the initial report. My technical team will authenticate the documents, confirm the financial trails, and cross-reference against our existing intelligence. If everything checks out, we publish immediately across multiple platforms simultaneously, too many outlets for them to suppress. And if they come after you before you can publish? Ramirez asked the practical question. Insurance protocols are already in place, Winters assured them. The moment I received Catherine's call, encrypted packets were prepared for automatic release to trusted colleagues if I miss specific check-ins. They may silence one voice, but they can't silence them all. The meeting concluded with exchange of secure communication protocols and contingency plans. As Winters departed through a separate exit, Catherine lingered behind with Morgan and the others. He'll do it, she said confidently. Alex has been hunting this story since Ryan died. It's personal for him, too. He lost a photographer to a supposedly random attack in Baghdad the same week Ryan's helicopter went down. Always believed the two were connected. What happens now? Morgan asked. The momentary relief of transferring the evidence already giving way to renewed anxiety. We wait, Ramirez answered, his vigilant gaze scanning their surroundings. Maintain security protocols. Prepare for potential retaliation once they realize what's happening. Catherine checked her watch. I need to return to my office before my absence raises flags. I've arranged a leave of absence starting tomorrow. Medical emergency, family-related, believable and difficult to verify on short notice. Is that safe? James asked, concern evident in his voice. Going back into the lion's den? Safer than disappearing suddenly, Catherine replied pragmatically. That would trigger immediate alerts. This way, I maintain plausible deniability for another 12 hours. By then, it won't matter anymore. They parted ways, the gravity of what they'd set in motion hanging over them like a thundercloud. Morgan felt strangely hollow as they drove back to the safe house. Not regretful, but acutely aware that they had just crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The machinery of exposure was now in motion, building momentum toward a confrontation that would change everything. Back at the safe house, an unexpected visitor was waiting. Noah's father, Robert Chen, his military bearing unmistakable despite the prosthetic leg and cane. Mr. Chen, Morgan greeted him with surprise. I thought you were staying with Noah in Columbus. Change of plans, Robert replied grimly. Noah's safe with my sister, but I thought you could use another set of hands here, especially hands with combat experience. Morgan glanced questioningly at Ellie, who nodded confirmation. I called him. Robert served in Force Recon before his injury. He knows operational security, and he's motivated. They burned down your garage, Robert said simply. Threatened my son. Made it personal. In my experience, when someone makes it personal, you need all the allies you can get. His presence was a welcome addition to their small band of resistors. As a former Marine with combat experience, he brought tactical knowledge that complemented Ramirez's more specialized background. More importantly, he brought a steadfast calm that helped steady Morgan's increasingly frayed nerves as the hours ticked by. Night fell with no word from either Catherine or Winters. The safe house grew tense with anticipation, each person finding their own way to manage the waiting. James paced restlessly, occasionally pausing to stare at the photos of Ryan they'd recovered from the Mustang. Ramirez cleaned his weapon with methodical precision, the routine clearly meditative for him. Ellie monitored communications, her medical training evident in her steady hands and focused attention. Morgan retreated to the garage, losing herself in the mechanical details of the Mustang's restoration. The familiar tasks, cleaning components, cataloging parts, planning the reassembly sequence provided structure amid chaos. Robert joined her after a while, his expertise with engines creating an easy camaraderie between them. Noah told me what you found in the car, he said as they worked side by side. About Ryan Westbrook and the evidence he hid. About what it cost him. Morgan nodded, focusing on the fuel line she was cleaning. He knew the risks, still chose to do the right thing. Reminds me of your sister, Robert observed quietly. Amanda never backed down either. Morgan's hands stilled. You knew Amanda? We deployed together on her last rotation. Different units, but same forward operating base. Robert's voice carried the weight of difficult memories. She had a reputation, the kind soldiers respect. Never asked anyone to take a risk she wouldn't take herself. When command needed volunteers for the dangerous missions, she was always first to step up. The unexpected connection to her sister hit Morgan with physical force. For years, Amanda had existed primarily in memories in the folded flag on her office wall. Hearing someone speak of her service, her character, made her present again in a way Morgan hadn't experienced since the notification officers had arrived at her door 3 years ago. Thank you, she managed finally, for telling me that. Robert nodded, understanding the significance of his words. Some legacies aren't meant to be forgotten, just like some truths aren't meant to stay buried. What you're doing with Ryan's evidence, with this car, it matters. Their moment of connection was interrupted by Ramirez's urgent call from the main room. We have movement, multiple vehicles approaching from the south access road. Morgan and Robert hurried inside, where surveillance monitors showed 3 black SUVs moving with purposeful speed toward the safe house. Their headlights cut through the darkness like predatory eyes, the uniformity of their movement suggesting coordinated action. How did they find us? James demanded, the color draining from his face. Unknown, Ramirez replied tersely, already activating emergency protocols. But they're 3 minutes out, tops. Grab go bags only, essential evidence. Everything else stays. Catherine? Morgan asked, fear clutching at her heart. No contact since the meeting, Ellie confirmed grimly. It's possible she was compromised. There was no time for speculation. They moved with practiced efficiency, gathering only what couldn't be replaced. The original evidence drives, personal weapons, emergency communications equipment. Morgan hesitated at the door to the garage, looking back at the Mustang with anguish. We can't take it, Ramirez stated the obvious. Too big, too slow, too recognizable. We can't just leave it, Morgan protested. It's Ryan's legacy. It's the physical proof of everything we're claiming. The documentation is what matters now, James said gently, though the pain in his eyes matched her own. The car has served its purpose. It delivered Ryan's message. We have to go. With a final glance at the Mustang, Morgan followed the others to the emergency exit, a concealed tunnel leading to a secondary location where backup vehicles waited. They had just reached the hidden entrance when the first explosion rocked the safe house, the concussive force knocking them forward into the tunnel. Move, Ramirez shouted above the ringing in their ears. They're not here to capture. They scrambled through the narrow passage, the sounds of the assault growing more distant as they put concrete and earth between themselves and their attackers. The tunnel emerged in a thickly wooded area a quarter-mile from the main structure, where two nondescript vehicles waited beneath camouflage tarps. "Split up," Ramirez directed as they reached the cars. Two groups, different destinations, reconnect at the secondary safe house in 24 hours. James and Ellie with me. Morgan and Robert in the second vehicle. No one argued with the logic of dividing their assets. Rapid goodbyes were exchanged as they separated, the gravity of their situation eliminating any sentimentality. Within minutes, both vehicles were moving away from the compromised safe house, taking separate routes through the darkness. Morgan drove while Robert maintained vigilance, his military training evident in the methodical way he scanned their surroundings. Neither spoke for the first hour, the shock of their narrow escape still too fresh for conversation. "Where are we heading?" Robert finally asked as they crossed into the next county. "Ramirez gave me coordinates for a fallback position," Morgan answered, her voice steady despite her thundering heart. "Old hunting cabin owned by someone he trusts. Should be another hour, assuming we're not followed." Robert checked the side mirrors for the 100th time. "No pursuit that I can see, but that doesn't mean they're not tracking us by other means." The cabin proved to be little more than a single room with basic amenities: a wood stove, cots, a rudimentary bathroom with a gravity-fed shower. Its primary virtue was its isolation, set deep in a national forest with no neighboring structures for miles. Perfect for hiding, challenging for escape if discovered. After securing the perimeter, Robert helped Morgan establish communications using the encrypted satellite phone Ramirez had provided. Their first call was to Noah, confirming his continued safety in Columbus. The second was an attempt to reach Catherine, which went unanswered. Finally, they contacted Winters, using the emergency protocol established during their meeting. "I've been trying to reach you," the journalist answered immediately, his voice tense. "Catherine's been arrested. Official charge is mishandling of classified information, but it's obviously a pretext. They moved within hours of our meeting." Morgan's heart sank. "Did they get the evidence too?" "No, my team already had it secured off-site. We're proceeding with publication. First report goes live at 6 a.m. tomorrow across multiple platforms simultaneously." Winters paused. "But there's something else you should know. The signature authorizing Catherine's arrest came from Senator Harrison's office, but the operational order was executed by Colonel Westbrook personally." The betrayal, though not entirely unexpected, still stung. "Her own father had her arrested?" "Welcome to Washington," Winters replied grimly. "Family ties mean nothing when power and freedom are at stake. The good news is they don't appear to have connected her to the evidence transfer yet. They're treating it as a security violation, not treason." "And the attack on the safe house?" Robert asked, taking the phone from Morgan. "Not officially sanctioned, no paper trail, no authorization through normal channels. Black operation, deniable assets. My sources say it's being run through private contractors with military backgrounds, the kind of men who ask no questions and leave no witnesses." After ending the call, Morgan and Robert sat in grim silence, processing the implications. They had less than 12 hours before Winter's story broke. 12 hours in which they remained the most vulnerable targets, the living witnesses who could confirm the evidence's provenance and credibility. "We should keep moving," Robert suggested. "This location is secure for now, but staying mobile makes us harder to track." Morgan nodded agreement, but exhaustion was rapidly overtaking her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the escape was fading, leaving bone-deep weariness in its wake. 3 days without proper sleep, constant tension, and emotional trauma were taking their toll. 4 hours of rest, she compromised. Then we moved before dawn. Robert took the first watch while Morgan collapsed onto one of the cots, her body surrendering to exhaustion despite her racing mind. Her dreams were fragmented, shifting. The Mustang engulfed in flames, her sister Amanda calling from beyond a wall she couldn't break through, Ryan Westbrook's face from the videos overlaid with Noah's, both warning of dangers she couldn't quite hear. She woke with a start to Robert's hand on her shoulder, his expression alert, but calm. Someone's coming. Single vehicle, approaching slowly. Morgan was instantly awake, reaching for the pistol Ramirez had provided. How far? About a mile out, based on sound, taking the access road, not trying to conceal their approach. Robert moved to the window, staying carefully to one side. Could be routine, Forest Service, game warden. Or it could be someone who knows exactly where to look. They position themselves strategically, Morgan covering the main entrance, Robert at the rear window with the clearest sight lines to the approaching road. Minutes tick by with excruciating slowness, the only sound their measured breathing and the distant rumble of an engine growing gradually closer. When the vehicle finally came into view, Morgan felt a jolt of recognition. It's a journalist's van, Channel 7 News. Robert remained skeptical. Could be a cover. Stay ready. The van stopped about 50 yards from the cabin, and a familiar figure emerged. Alex Winters, accompanied by a woman carrying professional camera equipment. They approached openly, making no attempt to conceal their presence. Morgan, Winters called from a respectful distance. It's Alex Winters. We need to talk, it's urgent. After careful verification through the window, Morgan allowed them inside, though Robert maintained a vigilant position, his weapon never far from reach. This is Diane Powell, my producer and videographer. Winters introduced his companion. What I'm about to tell you changes our timeline significantly. He produced a tablet displaying what appeared to be internal government communications. My source just forwarded these top-level directives regarding Operation Sandstorm. Senator Harrison is initiating emergency classification protocols effective tomorrow morning. Everything related to weapons transfers in Afghanistan during the relevant period will be retroactively sealed under national security provisions. Can he do that? Morgan asked, alarmed. As chairman of the Defense Committee, with the right emergency justifications? Yes. Winter's expression was grim. Once those orders take effect, publishing becomes legally precarious. We could be charged with revealing classified information regardless of how we obtained it. So you're accelerating publication? Robert guessed. More than that, Winters corrected. We need to record your testimony now, while it's still legally protected speech. First-person accounts from those who discovered the evidence, explaining how it was found and what it contains. Morgan understood immediately. Video testimony that can be released alongside the documents. So it's not just files that can be dismissed as forgeries. Exactly. Your faces, your voices, explaining how Ryan Westbrook hid evidence in his Mustang before his death. How you discovered it 15 years later during restoration. The human element that makes the technical evidence resonate with the public. It made perfect sense, but also created new risks. Once our faces are public, we lose anonymity forever. They'll know exactly who to target. They already know, Winters countered softly. The burning of your garage, the assault on the safe house, those weren't random. They know who you are, Morgan. What this does is give you protection through visibility. It's harder to make people disappear when millions have seen their faces and heard their stories. Morgan looked to Robert, who considered the proposal with military pragmatism. It's tactically sound, visibility is armor, and if something does happen to you after the story breaks, it only reinforces the evidence of conspiracy. All right, she agreed finally. Let's do it. But we need to record James's testimony too. He's Ryan's father. His voice matters more than mine. We'll find him next, Winters promised. But your story is crucial. You found the evidence. You've been targeted directly as a result. You're the bridge between Ryan's discovery and the present day. As Diane set up camera equipment in the cabin's main room, Morgan took a moment to compose herself. She was about to step irrevocably into the public eye, becoming the face of allegations against some of the most powerful men in the country. Everything would change after this: her privacy, her safety, her future. Ready when you are, Diane called softly, the camera now positioned with Morgan framed against the simple wooden wall of the cabin. My name is Morgan Reed, she began, her voice steadier than she'd expected. 3 weeks ago, I purchased a 1965 Ford Mustang for $600. I thought I was buying a restoration project. What I actually found was evidence of a military conspiracy that has remained hidden for 15 years. As she spoke, Morgan felt a strange sense of calm descending. Whatever came next, danger, persecution, vindication, she had made her choice. The Mustang had delivered its message across time, from a soldier who refused to be silenced to a mechanic who refused to look away. Now that message would reach millions, and the truth Ryan died for would finally see the light of day. In a hotel suite 40 miles away, Victor Westbrook watched the digital countdown on his secure phone, marking the hours until Winter's publication would go live. His daughter Catherine remained in custody, his brother James was in hiding, and the last loose ends, Morgan Reed and her allies, had slipped through his fingers at the safe house. For the first time in decades of meticulously controlled operations, Victor felt events spiraling beyond his influence. The truth he had buried with his nephew was clawing its way to the surface, carried by a restoration project that should never have been found. As dawn approached, he made one final call to Senator Harrison, the conversation brief and coded. Whatever happened next would determine not just their futures, but the shape of a scandal that threatened to rock the foundations of military oversight and congressional authority. The game was entering its final phase, with Morgan Reed and her unlikely allies positioned at the very center of the board. Dawn broke over the forest with tentative fingers of light penetrating the cabin's dusty windows. Morgan sat beside Robert, both watching the small tablet screen as Alex Winter's expose went live across multiple platforms simultaneously. The headline was stark in its simplicity: Operation Sandstorm, 15 years of military corruption, murder, and cover-up. The article opened with Morgan's testimony, her face earnest and determined as she explained finding Ryan Westbrook's hidden evidence cache in the 1965 Mustang. Then James appeared, the grief still raw in his eyes as he spoke about his son's death and the long journey to vindication. Catherine's documented evidence followed, meticulously organized and annotated with Winter's careful analysis. "It's done," Morgan whispered, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her: relief, fear, vindication, uncertainty. "No going back now." Robert checked his watch. 6 minutes since publication. It'll take time to spread, for people to understand the implications. How long before Victor and Harrison respond? Depends on whether they had advance warning. Robert's military experience lent weight to his assessment. Best case, they're scrambling to construct a defense. Worst case, they've prepared contingencies and are already implementing them. The satellite phone rang, its harsh electronic tone startling in the quiet cabin. Morgan answered cautiously. "It's Ramirez. Are you watching the rollout?" "Yes. How's James taking it?" "Stoically. 15 years is a long time to wait for vindication." Ramirez paused. "But we have complications. Catherine's being transferred from DOD custody to a federal detention facility. Official charge is still mishandling classified information, but they're expediting the process." "They're trying to isolate her," Robert surmised, listening on a speakerphone. "Prevent her from making additional statements now that the story's breaking." "Exactly. And there's more. Senator Harrison has called an emergency session of the Defense Committee for 9 a.m. His office released a statement claiming grave national security concerns about Winter's reporting. Morgan's stomach tightened. "They're going to try to classify everything retroactively, like Winters warned." "That's their play," Ramirez confirmed. "If they can get the committee to declare the information classified, they can potentially prosecute everyone involved in its release. Winters, his publisher, even witnesses like you and James." The implications were staggering. What had seemed like a moment of triumph was rapidly transforming into a new battlefield, with legal maneuvers replacing the physical threats they'd faced thus far. "What's our next move?" Morgan asked, suddenly unsure. "Winters is arranging a press conference for noon at the National Press Club in Washington. Maximum visibility, mainstream media presence, live coverage. He wants both you and James there, putting faces to the allegations, answering questions directly, making it impossible for Harrison to dismiss this as fabricated documents or anonymous sources." The thought of stepping into such a public spotlight was terrifying, but Morgan understood the strategy: visibility as protection. The more public their faces became, the harder it would be for their opponents to silence them through extra-legal means. "We'll be there," she decided, looking to Robert for confirmation. He nodded grimly, understanding both the necessity and the risk. "Good. Ellie will coordinate transport. Commercial flights aren't secure, so we're arranging private transportation. Be ready to move in 30 minutes. Ramirez ended the call with military brevity. As they gathered their minimal belongings, Robert's phone chimed with a news alert. His expression darkened as he read the screen. "Victor Westbrook just released a statement," he reported. "Says his daughter Catherine has been struggling with psychiatric issues. implying her evidence might be fabricated during a mental health crisis. Morgan felt sick. He's discrediting his own daughter to save himself. Standard counterintelligence tactic. Attack the credibility of the source when you can't refute the evidence. Robert's voice carried the weight of someone who had seen such tactics before. Makes Catherine's testimony at the press conference even more crucial. But she's in custody. For now. Robert's expression suggested he was considering possibilities beyond strictly legal channels. Ramirez has resources, and Catherine has supporters within DOD who know the truth about her father. They departed the cabin as planned, traveling by unmarked SUV to a small, private airstrip where a nondescript corporate jet waited. Ramirez met them there, his professional demeanor showing the first cracks of tension Morgan had observed. "Change of plans," he announced as they boarded. "Weiss is already in Washington with the Winters, preparing for the press conference. We're making a detour first." "Catherine?" Morgan guessed. Ramirez nodded once. "She's being transported to the Federal Detention Center by convoy. 2 vehicles, standard protocol, minimal security because the official charges are administrative, not criminal." "You're intercepting a federal prisoner transport?" Robert sounded incredulous. "That's crossing a line from exposure to active intervention." The line was crossed when they framed Morgan for arson, attacked the safe house with military-grade weapons, and arrested Catherine on false charges, Ramirez countered evenly. "This isn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It's about surviving long enough to make sure the exposure sticks." The gravity of their situation settled over the small cabin as the jet ascended. They were no longer simply witnesses or whistleblowers. They were actively fighting a system that had revealed itself willing to use every tool at its disposal, legal or otherwise, to maintain its secrets. Mid-air, Ramirez briefed them on the extraction plan. The prisoner transport would pass through a remote stretch of state highway with limited traffic. A mechanical issue would be created, forcing the convoy to stop. In the confusion, they would remove Catherine and depart before reinforcements could arrive. "Non-lethal methods only," Ramirez emphasized. "These are federal agents following orders, not primary targets. Incapacitate if necessary, but no permanent harm." Morgan listened with growing unease. This was far beyond anything she had envisioned when she first discovered Ryan's hidden cache in the Mustang. From restoring a classic car to planning what amounted to a military-style operation against federal agents, the escalation was dizzying. "Is this really necessary?" she asked quietly. "Once the press conference happens, once the full evidence is public." "By then it might be too late for Catherine," Ramirez explained. "She's not just a witness, Morgan. She's been gathering evidence against her father and Senator Harrison for years from inside the system. She knows operational details that aren't in the documents, names, dates, connections that only an insider would recognize. Without her testimony, they have a much better chance of containing this." The plane landed at a small regional airport where they transferred to ground vehicles, nondescript SUVs with tinted windows and reinforced frames. Ellie met them there, distributing tactical gear and communications equipment with the efficiency of someone who had conducted similar operations before. "Convoy departed the DOD facility 20 minutes ago," she reported. "Estimated intercept in 17 minutes at the designated location. Tactical team is already in position." Morgan was surprised to discover that the tactical team consisted primarily of veterans, men and women who had served alongside Ramirez, Ellie, or Robert in various capacities. Not mercenaries or thrill seekers, but former service members who believed in the mission to expose corruption that had claimed lives in war zones they had personally experienced. The intercept location was a stretch of highway cutting through dense forest, with limited visibility and no nearby structures. As Morgan watched from a concealed position, events unfolded with practiced precision. A disabled vehicle blocked one lane, causing the convoy to slow. When the lead car stopped to investigate, smoke canisters deployed, obscuring visibility. The extraction team moved with coordinated efficiency, neutralizing the federal agents with non-lethal tactics, securing Catherine, and withdrawing before the smoke cleared. Within minutes, they were back in their vehicles, speeding away from the scene with Catherine Westbrook, pale and disoriented but physically unharmed, in their custody. "Are you okay?" Morgan asked her as they raced toward the secondary airstrip where their plane waited. Catherine nodded, still processing her sudden liberation. They didn't tell me anything, just that I was being transferred on national security grounds. My security clearance was revoked, my devices confiscated. Her voice steadied. My father personally supervised my initial detention. Didn't say a word to me directly, just watched as they processed me. The betrayal was evident in her voice. Not just professional, but deeply personal. Victor Westbrook had chosen self-preservation over his daughter without apparent hesitation. Winter's story is live, Morgan informed her. Your evidence is public. There's a press conference at noon in Washington. They want us all there. You, me, James. Maximum visibility. As they boarded the waiting aircraft, Ramirez received an urgent communication. His expression remained professional, but Morgan detected a subtle shift in his posture. Senator Harrison's office has issued an emergency national security directive, he reported once they were airborne. All documents related to Operation Sandstorm are now classified retroactively. Publication constitutes a felony offense. Can they do that legally? Morgan asked. It's a gray area, Catherine replied, her expertise in defense protocols evident. They're claiming the documents contain operational details that could compromise ongoing military activities. It's a delaying tactic at best, but effective in the short term. Winter's publisher has already filed for emergency injunctive relief, Ramirez added, arguing First Amendment protections and prior publication doctrine. But legal battles take time. So the press conference becomes even more critical, Robert concluded. Direct testimony from witnesses that can't be easily classified or suppressed. The flight to Washington was tense, each of them preparing in their own way for what would be the most public moment of their lives. Morgan found herself thinking about the journey that had led her here, from struggling mechanic to the center of a national scandal involving military corruption, illegal weapons, and murder. The Mustang that had seemed like a simple restoration project had become the vehicle for something far more profound. They landed at a small executive airport outside the Capitol, where Alex Winters was waiting with a production team and security detail. The journalist looked simultaneously exhausted and energized, the culmination of a 15-year investigation finally within reach. Harrison's classification gambit is already backfiring, he informed them as they transferred to waiting vehicles. 3 major newspapers have published editorial statements refusing to comply with the directive, citing prior publication and public interest. Social media is amplifying the story faster than they can contain it. And my father? Catherine asked quietly. Colonel Westbrook has maintained official silence, but our sources say he's been in continuous meetings at the Pentagon since the story broke. The military hierarchy is fracturing, some closing ranks around him, others distancing themselves. Your extraction from federal custody has complicated matters further. The National Press Club was swarming with activity when they arrived through a secure entrance. Journalists from every major outlet crowded the main room, cameras and recording equipment arranged for maximum coverage. Security was tight, with Winter's private teams supplementing the club's regular protocols. In a small preparation room, Morgan met James Westbrook again, the emotional reunion brief but heartfelt. The older man looked simultaneously exhausted and revitalized, the burden of 15 years of futile searching now transformed into public vindication. The reunion between James and his niece, Catherine, was more complex. They had known each other primarily through Ryan, with Victor's increasing estrangement from his brother creating distance between the extended family. Ryan always said you were different from your father, James told her quietly, that you asked questions others avoided. He would be proud to see you standing with us today. Catherine's composure cracked slightly at the mention of her cousin. I couldn't save him, but I can make sure his death wasn't meaningless. As the noon hour approached, Winters briefed them on the format. He would introduce the case, present an overview of the evidence, then bring each of them forward for brief statements, followed by controlled questions from selected journalists. The emphasis was on clarity, credibility, and emotional impact. Speak from personal experience, and he advised. Direct, straightforward accounts of what you saw, what you found, what happened to you as a result. The technical details are in the published documents. What you provide is the human dimension that makes it impossible to dismiss. Morgan nodded, understanding the strategy, but still nervous about addressing a national audience. Her world had been engines and transmissions, not press conferences and public testimony. Just tell the truth, Robert encouraged her quietly. The same way you would explain a complicated repair to a customer. Clear, honest, straightforward. The press conference began precisely at noon, with live coverage across multiple networks ensuring maximum exposure. Winters opened with a powerful summary of Operation Sandstorm, how military equipment worth millions had been diverted from legitimate channels, sold to unauthorized recipients, with profits flowing through shell companies to offshore accounts connected to Senator Harrison and Colonel Victor Westbrook. But this isn't just about money, Winters emphasized, his voice carrying the gravity of the accusations. It's about the deliberate silencing of those who discovered the truth. Captain Ryan Westbrook documented this corruption in 2008, hiding evidence in his personal vehicle before his suspicious death in a helicopter crash. His father, James, spent 15 years searching for answers, facing ridicule and obstruction at every turn. James spoke next, his testimony devastating in its simplicity. A father's quest for truth about his son's death, the institutional resistance he encountered, and the vindication that came through the unlikely discovery of Ryan's hidden evidence. When Morgan's turn came, she approached the podium with trepidation that dissolved once she began speaking. The story flowed naturally, finding the Mustang, discovering the hidden compartments, the subsequent attacks and threats, the destruction of her garage. The assembled journalist leaned forward as she described the hidden evidence in vivid, specific detail that only someone who had personally discovered it could provide. Catherine's testimony was perhaps the most damning, a methodical account of her years working within the Department of Defense, documenting her father's activities, gathering evidence legally through her security clearance. Her description of being arrested on her father's orders brought audible reactions from the assembled press. As the questioning began, Morgan noticed a disturbance at the back of the room. Two men in dark suits were speaking urgently to the security personnel at the main entrance. Through the glass doors beyond, she could see additional figures in what appeared to be tactical gear. Ramirez noticed as well, subtly shifting his position to better monitor the situation while maintaining a calm exterior. Something was happening, the carefully orchestrated press conference now threatened by external forces. The first indication of trouble came when the lights flickered momentarily. Then the main doors opened and a senior federal agent entered, flanked by armed officers. This proceeding is being terminated under national security protocols, he announced, his voice carrying official authority. All materials related to Operation Sandstorm have been classified at the highest level. Continued discussion constitutes a federal offense. Winters stepped forward, unintimidated. This is a press conference in a private facility. We have First Amendment protections and prior publication exemptions. We have a federal warrant for the arrest of Catherine Westbrook for escape from custody and misappropriation of classified information. The agent continued, ignoring Winters' objection. We are also authorized to detain James Westbrook, Morgan Reed, and Alexander Winters for questioning regarding unauthorized possession of classified military documents. The room erupted in chaos, journalists shouting questions, cameras swinging toward the confrontation, security personnel from both sides taking positions. Morgan felt a surge of panic. After everything they had endured, to be arrested now, at the moment of public revelation, seemed a cruel twist of fate. Then, unexpectedly, a new voice cut through the cacophony. That won't be necessary, Agent Reynolds. The crowd parted to reveal a distinguished older man in a military uniform, adorned with the insignia of a four-star general. His presence commanded immediate attention, federal agents and journalists alike falling silent as he walked deliberately to the front of the room. General Andrews, the lead agent acknowledged, clearly surprised. Sir, we have explicit orders from Senator Harrison's office in Doha to— I'm countermanding those orders, General Andrews interrupted calmly. As chairman of the Joint Chiefs, I have reviewed the evidence presented in Mr. Winters' publication and find it credible enough to warrant full investigation through proper channels. The statement landed like a bombshell in the already charged atmosphere. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officer in the country, was publicly acknowledging the validity of their allegations. Sir, Senator Harrison has classified all materials related to Senator Harrison is currently being questioned by the FBI regarding his financial connections to unauthorized weapons transfers, General Andrews stated flatly. His classification directive has been suspended pending review. Morgan looked at Catherine, whose expression reflected her own astonishment. This development was entirely unexpected. Support from the highest levels of military leadership when they had anticipated only opposition. Furthermore, the general continued, addressing the room at large, I have initiated a full military investigation into Colonel Victor Westbrook's activities related to Operation Sandstorm. Colonel Westbrook has been relieved of duty pending the outcome of this investigation. The federal agents looked thoroughly confused, their clear chain of command now disrupted by conflicting orders from different authorities. General Andrews took advantage of their hesitation to approach the podium. Ms. Westbrook, Mr. Westbrook, Ms. Reed, I would like to personally thank you for your courage in bringing this matter to light. Captain Ryan Westbrook's service and sacrifice will be acknowledged appropriately once the full investigation is complete. The press conference resumed with General Andrews remaining, his presence effectively preventing any further attempts to shut down the proceedings. The questions now focused on the military's response, the timeline for investigation, and the potential ramifications for those implicated. Throughout it all, Morgan felt a surreal sense of transition, from hunted to protected, from accuser to witness, from outsider to essential participant in a process of accountability. The system that had seemed completely corrupted was revealing fracture lines, internal forces of integrity pushing back against the corruption. As the formal proceedings concluded, General Andrews requested a private meeting with their group. In a secure room adjacent to the main press area, he explained the rapid developments that had occurred behind the scenes. When Mr. Winter's story broke this morning, several officers who had harbored suspicions about Operation Sandstorm for years came forward with corroborating information, he explained. The evidence was compelling enough that I took it directly to the president, bypassing normal channels that might have been compromised by Senator Harrison's influence. And my father? Catherine asked, her professional composure maintained despite the personal cost. Colonel Westbrook was offered an opportunity to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for consideration during sentencing. General Andrews replied carefully. He declined. His current whereabouts are unknown. The implication was clear. Victor Westbrook had fled rather than face accountability. The man who had orchestrated Ryan's death, arrested his own daughter, and authorized attacks on Morgan and the others, was now a fugitive. What happens now? Morgan asked, still processing the dramatic shift in their circumstances. You'll be placed under protective custody until we can ensure all threats have been neutralized, the general explained. Your testimony will be crucial to the formal investigations now being initiated through multiple agencies. This won't be resolved quickly. Corruption this entrenched takes time to fully expose and address. As they were escorted from the National Press Club through heavy security, Morgan found herself walking alongside James Westbrook. The older man seemed simultaneously exhausted and energized, the vindication of his son's actions finally achieved after 15 years of futile searching. Ryan would be proud, she told him quietly, of you, of Catherine, of everything you've done to bring the truth to light. James nodded, emotion evident in his weathered features. I keep thinking about that Mustang, how Ryan chose it as his messenger across time, how it found its way to exactly the right person when it mattered most. I wish we could have saved it, Morgan admitted, remembering the partially restored vehicle they'd been forced to abandon at the safe house. It deserved to be completed, to run again. Perhaps it still can be, James replied with unexpected optimism. General Andrews mentioned they secured the safe house after the attack. The damage was primarily to the main structure, not the underground garage. The possibility ignited a spark of hope in Morgan's heart. The Mustang had been more than just a vehicle or evidence cache. It had become a symbol, a physical connection to Ryan's courage and foresight, to the legacy that had changed all their lives. Their protective escort delivered them to a secure government facility where they would remain during the initial phases of the investigation. As they settled into the surprisingly comfortable accommodations, news alerts continued to flood their monitored devices. Senator Harrison had been taken into custody. Additional evidence was emerging from within the Pentagon as officers freed from fear of retaliation came forward, and international partners were confirming unauthorized weapons shipments that matched the Sandstorm documentation. The story was growing beyond any individual component, taking on a momentum of its own as 15 years of carefully concealed corruption unraveled in the public eye. What Ryan Westbrook had discovered, documented, and hidden away had finally achieved its purpose, exposing the truth regardless of the power of those involved. That evening, as Morgan sat alone in her secure room, she received an unexpected message from Ramirez. Attached was a photograph that made her breath catch. The Mustang, damaged but intact, being carefully loaded onto a transport vehicle under military supervision. The accompanying text was brief but meaningful. Some legacies deserve to be restored completely. When this is over, the car comes back to you. Ryan would have wanted his father's Mustang in the hands of someone who understands what it truly represents. Morgan studied the image, emotion welling up unexpectedly. The Mustang had started this journey, a silent messenger carrying truth across 15 years, from a soldier who refused to be silenced to a mechanic who refused to look away. Now it would continue, not just as evidence or memory, but as a living testament to the power of integrity that couldn't be buried or forgotten. Outside her window, Washington continued its eternal rhythms, power shifting and realigning as it had for centuries. But in secure rooms throughout the Capitol, the evidence Ryan Westbrook had hidden in his father's Mustang was forcing a reckoning that no amount of influence or authority could prevent. The truth, once fully revealed, had a power all its own, to bring justice, to honor sacrifice, and to ensure that some legacies endure beyond attempts to erase them. For Morgan Reed, the journey that had begun with a $600 classic car purchase had transformed everything. Her understanding of justice, her place in the world, and her connection to a soldier she'd never met, but whose courage had changed her life immeasurably. Whatever challenges remained, she would face them knowing that some fights were worth every sacrifice, some truths worth any cost to defend. The Mustang would run again. The truth would stand, and Ryan Westbrook's legacy, protected and delivered by steel and courage, would finally receive the honor it had always deserved.